know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is In Putin's Footsteps, Searching for the Soul of an Empire Across Russia's 11 Time Zones by Nina Khrushcheva and Jeffrey Taylor. This is from the introduction titled In Putin's Footsteps. On New Year's Eve 1999, journalists in the Russian president's press pool had a feeling that things were going to change. They were right. The feeble and aging Boris Yeltsin, who could barely board a plane or stand for a 15-minute press conference, was about to deliver his end-of-the-year address in which he resigned and ceded power to his prime minister and hand-picked successor, Vladimir Putin. Once head of the Federal Security Service, the FSB, the post-communist democratic version of the dreaded KGB, Putin was indeed an unusual choice, having served as the head of the government for only a few months. But the 48-year-old ex-spy, who had become the youngest Kremlin leader since the Soviet Union's founders, Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin, had a quiet energy that seemed boundless as the geographic expanses contained within Russia's 11 time zones. After taking over from Yeltsin as acting president on the first day of the new millennium, and after winning by a landslide presidential elections 3 months later, Putin, in the year to come, held over a dozen press conferences and traveled to almost 24 countries and at least a quarter of Russia's 89 regions, which are spread out over 11 time zones. Altogether, he was seen in public and on television more often than Yeltsin during most of his 8-year presidency. Suddenly, the press had something to report. The news stories were no longer those of Yeltsin's Russia, which was perceived both at home and abroad as weak, insignificant, and a corrupt boogeyman reeling from its Cold War defeat. These were stories of an enigmatic young technocrat tirelessly crisscrossing the country and meeting with workers, farmers, and cultural figures, attending theater galas and factory openings. All that uplifting travel, Russia was starving for the Kremlin's attention, connected Putin to ordinary people, and gave him the idea of delivering a rousing New Year's Eve televised address to the nation. Standing before the Kremlin's Spassky Tower just before the giant bells rang in the year 2001, under starry winter skies in front of a large snow-dusted Christmas tree, he pledged to counter the negativity of the post-Soviet decade and set the country on a new positive course. And this he did. In his address, the ardent young leader looked both charming and in charge when he spoke of Russia's great future, heroic past, and enduring spirit. Putin had often appeared in a reserved technocrat, but soon he would demonstrate a talent for finding opportunities to impress the heartland. He knew the best way to get to people's hearts, showing them that his priority was returning Russia to the world stage as a major power of formidable dimensions. Originally, he had an even bolder plan for his New Year's address, and he'd run it by journalists in his press pool during one of his trips around Russia. Without a hint of doubt in his voice, Putin told them that, quote, "Russia is an enormous country, a great country. We need to remember that our strength is our size. What if I were to travel through Russia's limitless land in one night, through all of its 11 time zones, stopping in each one at midnight local time to record a New Year's message to show our nation's greatness, our richness, the diversity of our mother Russia, our unity, and our worth?" Even though Russia's time zones are exaggerated in number, there should be only 7, according to generally accepted geographic markers of Greenwich Mean Time. It's a 24-hour cycle, also called UTC. Maintaining them is not only a political matter, it is reflective of the national identity, state power, and international influence. Russia has 11 time zones, more than any other country, and that, as Russians would have it, bespeaks its status in a way no one can deny. Often the time that appears on a nation's iconic clock, Big Ben in the United Kingdom, for example, or those daunting dials on the Spassky Tower in Russia's case, is a subtle way of representing where power lies. In Russia, every time zone is first referred to in relation to MSK, Moscow Standard Time, with UTC only following. Moreover, many countries don't even adhere to the 24-hour GMT UTC's neat meridians. China's huge landmass should straddle 5 different time zones, yet operates according to just one. Inhabitants of Western China, if they follow their clocks, have dark mornings and light evenings, but nobody doubts that only the Beijing time matters. When Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela in 1999, he created a new time zone that would set Venezuela 30 minutes apart from neighboring countries. That was his way of letting the world know that Venezuela was striking out on its own. But Putin's idea of showcasing his country's temporal and geographic diversity in just one night was certainly unique, and it accorded with his plans to return Russia to its lost great power status. It also sprung from what Putin knew Russians expect of their leader, something close to godlike status. Keen on creating a leader's image steeped in tradition, history, and mythology, often associated with the uniqueness of the Russian soul, spiritual endurance, persevering patience, belief in miracles, and material sacrifice, he wanted to be seen as the dead Moroz, the granddad Frost, the Russian Santa Claus, bearing gifts of renewed national importance and self-confidence. Capitalizing on Russia's size, 6,000 miles from east to west, Putin hoped to begin restoring his country's grandeur, once Tsarist, then Soviet, and now Russian. The idea was bold and beautiful, but unfortunately unrealizable. And it goes on from there. The book In Putin's Footsteps by Nina Khrushcheva and Jeffrey Taylor.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And happy Friday. Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. As Matthew Whitaker is, whenever a Republican questions him, he goes off on these long, oh, the wonderful stuff we did in the Trump administration. I am such a good guy. And whenever a Democrat questions him, it's like, well, Congresswoman, you have 5 minutes, so I'm going to think very carefully before I answer your question. And Barbara Lee was having none of it. She got seriously PO'd. Anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday, whatever's on your mind. There are numbers 202-808-9925. Deborah Berger from the National Nurses United is going to drop by at the bottom of the hour for a few minutes and just update us on what they're doing with regard to Medicare for All. And but you know, a couple of things I'd like to toss out there. The Axios has got a piece this morning where they're talking about how the Republicans have been polling on the word socialism. And what they're finding is that the majority of Americans and the vast majority of Republicans hate socialism. They may not know what it is, but they know that they hate it. And so the big bet that Frank Luntz and Trump and Pence and Republicans all over the country, the big bet that they're going to make is that they can go into the 2020 election, and probably the Koch brothers too, as they're going to be funding probably the majority of the TV ads you see on TV, or a large chunk of them anyway. The big bet that they're making is that they can go in and say, you don't want to re-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a socialist. You don't want to you don't want to elect so-and-so. He's a socialist. And whoever the Democrat nominee is for president, they're going to, I guarantee you, 100%, they are going to call that person a socialist. And so there's this war coming, essentially, between socialism and capitalism. Because among young people, socialism actually polls better than capitalism. But among older people, and particularly older white people, and particularly in that subset, the older white Republicans, no, socialism is pretty bad and capitalism is wonderful stuff. So, who's going to win this war? Are we going to start embracing socialism? I already have. I said this yesterday. I had a number of people who called in and said, oh, don't use that word. The Republicans will twist it around. They'll say that you're a socialist. And I'm like, cool. Screw the right-wingers. I don't care. I'm just like, I see no reason to pander to low information Trump voters who watch Fox News, listen to right-wing hate radio, and therefore are either misinformed, they believe things that simply are not true, or they're uninformed. They don't know what the hell's going on. I'm not worried about their opinion of me, frankly. And when they come in and they tweet at me, and I get these tweets from somebody who's got, like 12,000 tweets and 16 followers, it's like, how do you do that? Right? 12,000 tweets, 16 followers? Really? How do you do that? I mean, it's got to be a bot, right? I mean, isn't that kind of a giveaway? I don't know. But anyhow, but they go, oh, you're a socialist. Yeah, fine. Call me what you want. So number one. And number two, yesterday I made the kind of offhand comment that, somebody called and said, okay, if we're going to have Medicare for all, we should include pets in that. And I assumed, I still think I was right, that the guy was a right-wing troll and, was trying to get somebody of some note on the left to say, yes, we should cover pets with Medicare for all, so that the Republicans could then, go crazy with it and say, see, these guys are nuts, it's going to break the bank, which it would do, by the way. And so I said, no. I said, if you can't afford to have a pet, you shouldn't have a pet. But there is a very real problem, and I'm getting a bunch of flack both from people who work with me here and my wife for saying that. Because, we all have pets, right? And, we super anthropomorphize our pets, like, oh, they're not pets, they're members of the family. There's a long way from, when Louise was a kid and her parents, she used to spend the summers on her grandparents' farm in central Michigan. And they had barn cats. And, the barn cats ate the mice, and the barn cats, if they got sick, they died. And the barn cats were never taken to the vet or anything. And, kind of a different attitude about pets, whereas now it's like, oh, my little kitty has so-and-so, I'll spend $6,000 for surgery. Well, the problem is most Americans can't afford. Say what? Yeah, most Americans can't afford $6,000 for pet surgery. So, it's like, this is just all very strange stuff. There's some very strange stuff. So, should there be government intervention in the pet business? I think not, frankly. But what do you think? Should we be more rigorously regulating what veterinarians can charge? Is there a limit on a number of people who can graduate from veterinarian school? To the best of my knowledge, hey Nate, the volume levels are like, okay, you're figuring it out. Okay. So what do we do about this? Or do we do nothing about it? I toss that out to you. But anyhow, it's Anything Goes Friday, so let's pick up your calls. Stan in Spokane, Washington. Hey, Stan, what's up?
Hey, Tom. I was debating with a right-wing coworker regarding raising taxes on the wealthy, and he claimed that the wealthy pay the bulk of the taxes. And I don't believe that, but I don't know where to go to get that information.
If you're talking actual tax payments, the majority of tax payments made in the United States by individual taxpayers are being made by people who make over $150,000, $200,000.
Really, even after all the loopholes and everything?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's because they're taking the majority of the money. I mean, if they're taking 90% of the money and paying 70% of the taxes, they can say, hey, I'm paying a majority of the taxes, more than 70, but hey, you're taking 90% of the money. So that's true. Whenever a conservative says, oh yeah, but the rich people are paying most of the taxes, the answer needs to be, yeah, but they've got a lot more than that in terms of most of the money.
That's true.
So, by and large, they tend to pay, less as a percentage of their income, particularly the very wealthy. There is this fairly substantial cohort. It's probably a couple million people who are making more than, say, 150, 200,000 and less than 300 or 400,000. Say more than 200 and less than 500. There's a fair number of people that fall into that category. Like I said, it's probably a couple million people nationwide. And that group is the group that's really getting screwed, if you want to talk about taxes, because they don't have the ability to have these kind of loopholes that you can have if you have over $1 million a year in income. So they're paying the full 37 or 39% or whatever it is right now. But they're not, or at least they're paying it on their top marginal rate on the money they make over $100 and some odd thousand. But you know, it's still they've got a damn good life. I mean, I'm not crying in my beer for those people. So,
me either.
Yeah, so that's the situation.
Yeah.
Stan, thanks a lot for the call. Omar in Herndon, Virginia. Hey, Omar, what's up?
Tom, thank you so much for taking my call, and good day to you. Tom, you know, during the government shutdown, a lot of my friends who work for the government, they were really very happy how the credit union and their agencies responded to the whole situation. I mean, they worked with them in terms of payment and things like that. And it's just something that stood out, and you know, that we need to encourage more people to sign on with credit union, you know, versus these corporations, these Wall Street banks.
Right.
You know, and it's just something that stood out to me. But what I wanted to ask you your opinion. Do you think Trump set up the standard for immigration for Republicans? In another way, in 2020, if any Republican running for anything, if he doesn't ask for the wall, he's not going to get the base support?
I think that the wall, whether he gets the wall or not, he's already won that argument for his base. They know that he's fighting to keep brown people out of America, and that's all they care about. You know, I think probably many of them realize that there is no epidemic of people trying to cross the border. Border crossings are lower than they've been since 1971. There's no crisis at our border. And the caravans, in quotes, that are coming up here are people who are showing up at ports of entry saying, I want to apply for asylum. They are not, you know, storming the walls. They are not trying to sneak into the country. They are following a legal process that's part of our law and part of international law.
Sure.
So, you know, I think probably most Trump supporters at some level know that, but mostly they just want to make sure that America doesn't get any browner. I mean, that's really the bottom line, and Trump has staked that out. He's, you know, no more Muslims. He actually got the Supreme Court to go along with him on that, and now it's no more brown people from Central and South America.
Yeah, but is this a football that other Republicans will carry on, like
of course.
anyways for Senate? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, the entire Republican Party now is officially the party that's opposed to melanin. Right? They're opposed to skin pigment. That's the Republican Party's position. You know, and you know, and the party of and let's not let white people get any darker either. Let's you know, suntan cream for everybody. I mean, this is how absurd it's getting. Omar, thank you for the call. It's 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program, where we are exposing the con in conservative. And welcome back. Don in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Don, what's on your mind today?
Hi there, Tom. It's a pleasure to talk to a great mind, and thank you again for your conversations with great minds. I was so thrilled to see that coming back. That's been an excellent part of your program over the years. I've been with you forever, back to the KPOJ days. And what I wanted to talk about is how we think about economics.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had the rare privilege of being the chaplain of the Stanford Business School for 2 years when they were putting this nonsense in. And
oh, that's interesting.
Having a theological take on it was amazing. They violate every principle of Mills, Adam, and Ricardo, and called this free market capitalism. So it's a mess to begin with intellectually. But here's the idea. An economy is a metaphysical creation that human beings and societies put together to serve society. Money is the blood or the energy that keeps that body alive and healthy. So it has to flow.
Right.
That's why we call liquidity so important.
Right.
Now, it also has to nourish everything. Because if your toe isn't nourished, if that part of the body isn't nourished, you limp. If your head gets all the money or all the blood, you have an aneurysm. So it's a matter of systems health. What's produced by the collective effort of a society is the commonwealth. How that gets distributed is also maintaining the system. You can't have it accumulate. That's the problem with dynastic capitalism. It accumulates wealth in unproductive places.
Right,
so
like the Walton family. Yes.
Yeah. So now if we are playing in a democratically designed economy, I don't want to call it capitalism or socialism. That gets too crazy. But let's just say a democratically designed economy. And our goal is to make sure that the money gets everywhere, that it's needed, nourishes everybody, empowers productivity, it's the energy, and that when it's finished, we allocate the product collectively in a way that's just. Doesn't that make sense as how we do our currency? And then everything about currency and how we play in that can be designed to have a great deal of freedom and commerce or a great deal of collective planning. But the point is, when we finish doing all that, we have to redeal the chips.
Yeah. No, I get your point, and I agree with you on everything. And here's the one weakness in your argument, Don. As long as you're using concepts like justice, you're saying, we're going to distribute that money in a way that's just. Well, Charles Koch's idea of what's just is very different from mine.
That's why we call it a democratic design instead of an oligarchic design. Sure, if you decide that the most productive, best human society would be a slave system, with all the wealth you can generate from slavery and all the high living that the elite can show up with, that's your decision politically. I don't think Americans don't make that decision politically.
Well, I think to some extent we're there right now. I mean,
democracy. We get confused with capitalism. We get confused with socialism. We first get confused with it's my money.
Yeah. I think we're largely there. I mean, the United States, the U.S. was up until the 1980s a high-wage country. We are now a middle to low-wage country, and that has wiped out to large portions of the middle class and made it much harder for people in the lower economic levels to come up into the middle class because, it's just like that middle ground is no longer there. Don, thanks for the call. It's fascinating stuff. Coming up on 21 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and apologies for the audio problem at the beginning of the show, but what I was talking about is there a war between capitalism and socialism? A rhetorical war. The Republicans think that they're going to campaign in 2020 on Democrats being socialists, and they think that that's going to cause Americans to vote against Democrats. In fact, they're so optimistic, Trump thinks he can get reelected on that one issue. Do you think he can get reelected on that one issue of calling whoever runs against him a socialist? I think Americans are going to start loving socialism, but we'll see. We'll see. I get it that old farts who just remember the USSR are not going to, in all probability, but we'll see. By the way, another big news thing that happened I wanted to share with you, and then I'll pick up your phone calls. The Met Office, which is the weather office, the National Weather Service for the United Kingdom, they call it the Metropolitan, or the Met Office, has said that, well, let me back up just a little bit. You will recall that the IPCC, every 5 years for a couple of decades now, has been saying, at all cost, we have to prevent the atmosphere from warming more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. About 3 degrees Fahrenheit, to a little less than 3 degrees Fahrenheit. If we don't do that, if we fail to stop it at 1.5 degrees, if it goes past 1.5 degrees, then you're going to start seeing permafrost melt. You're going to start seeing methane clathrates melt. You're going to see an explosion of methane in the atmosphere. A positive feedback loop will be triggered that can't be stopped. And within a few decades, perhaps, or a century at the most, life on Earth is going to be a very different place, and civilization will probably be over. Right? This is the warning of the IPCC. Well, the UK's National Weather Service, the Met Office, and the IPCC was saying we've got to prevent this from happening in 2100, which is like 80 years from now, 80 plus years from now. Well, the Met Office just came out and said we think we're going to hit 1.5 degrees at least on a transient basis, intermittently. We're going to hit 1.5 degrees in 5 years. This stuff is moving a hell of a lot faster than anybody thought. Cliff in Canyon Country, California. Hey, Cliff. Thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Good morning, Tom. I watch Free Speech TV, and from my angle, looks like you have no gray hair, sir. What do you attribute this to?
It mostly hair dye.
Okay, good dear.
My wife's
so,
advice.
So, Tom, I enjoy life. I really, really do. I'm about to hit 60 this summer. I've had several near-death experiences in my life, probably about 7 or 8 legitimate ones, 3 or 4 before I was even 2 years old. So, maybe there's some entity watching over me. I don't know. In any case, like my friend Don says, you got to get out there and hit it because life's getting shorter by the minute. So the reason I called, I think the most tragic thing going on here is, what our very existence as a species depends on going forward has turned into partisan politics, not science. And it's insane. I mean, we're in the 6th mass extinction.
Yep.
And as far as I know, the other 5 didn't have, so-called intelligent beings witnessing and contributing to their own demise like we are.
Right.
And this is our legacy. The post-industrial revolution man, this is our legacy, destroying the earth, causing catastrophe, making life mostly, uninhabitable, basically all for money, for corporate profits. And it just seems like these things always come down to greed. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. Greed is killing this planet. The greed of the fossil fuel billionaires who will lie to us about climate change, the greed of the big chemical companies that will lie to us about whether their products cause cancer or autism or whatever. The greed of a medical and healthcare industry that wants to rip us all off. I mean, it's just. I absolutely agree, Cliff. And the problem is that greed is the predicating assumption of capitalism. The whole core idea of capitalism is that greed is good, as Michael Douglas said in Wall Street. And therefore, if you want to have functioning capitalism inside your society, you have to have a regulatory system that down-regulates greed so that, greed is still a motivator. It still causes people to start businesses and things, but that it doesn't allow them to take it to these ridiculous extremes where people become multi-billionaires and corporations just wipe out everything in the landscape. So spot on. Thanks a lot for the call, Cliff. Jeff in Virginia Beach. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I'm just wondering, is a social democracy the same as democratic socialism?
Yeah.
And if so, why don't we call it a social democracy? Because then how would you Republicans keep referring to Venezuela if we're talking about a social democracy?
Right. Venezuela is not socialist and never really was. Venezuela it was a corrupt petro oligarchy before Chavez came along, and it has been one ever since. And, Venezuela is not an example of socialism. You want an example of socialism, look at Northern Europe. And in Europe, they refer to it as social democracy. Here, we refer to it as democratic socialism. And we just need to use the word a lot more, Jeff, in my opinion. We need to, and thank you for the call, we need to bring this word back into fashion. We need to make this word, socialism, because the Republicans have already publicly out loud said they're going to use this against us. We're going to check in with the national nurses right after the break, and then we'll continue to pick up your phone calls for the rest of the day. Stick around.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the place where smart people get their news. The Thom Hartmann Program, occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. For our book club today, we're reading from a book edited by Cynthia McKinney. It's a compiled collection of essays titled How the U.S. Creates, shall we say, S-hole countries. I can't say that word on the air. And this is from her introduction, a deeper look at Trump's epithet, S-hole country. I wish I could take full credit for the idea of doing a book on President Trump's unfortunate characterization of some countries as S-hole countries, verified recently by fired ex-White House staffer Omarosa Manigault. The idea was brought to me by a Facebook friend, and I immediately saw the brilliance of that idea. Although at the time the president tried to walk back the revelation that he used such language to describe certain countries, he couldn't help himself. And during the visit of Nigeria's president to the White House, he doubled down on that characterization, saying that certain countries were tough places to live. It was only recently that Omarosa confirmed that, yes, the president had described certain countries as asshole countries. The media had a field day with the, at the time, alleged remarks. Steve Dempsey of the Bay Area News Group compiled a slideshow of cartoons from national news outlets that lambasted the president. Lambasted, whatever it is. The Mercury News Online ran the slideshow that included hilarious cartoons by Rick McKee at the Augustus Chronicle and Bob Englehart with Kago Cartoons and others. Mark Schuller, writing in the Huffington Post, noted, Haiti has been targeted for its decisive role in challenging what Southern planters, including 8 U.S. presidents, called a peculiar institution. The Haitian Revolution was the first time slaves were able to permanently end slavery and forge an independent nation. It was also a tipping point in U.S. history, leading to the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, paving the way for U.S. manifest destiny stretching from sea to shining sea and eventual dominance. Chicago, the country's third largest city, was founded by a Haitian, Jean-Baptiste Pont-du-Sable, or Sable, who Haitian historian Mark Rosier called an agent of the Haitian government to pursue a pro-freedom international policy. End of quote from that. Jen Kirby went farther, and in an online media outlet, Vox, interview with a Stanford University history professor, the word eugenics was used as a descriptor for what Trump's characterization actually represented. Stanford professor Anna Minion said of the interview, what Trump said was basically a form of eugenics, in which he's saying, this is the population we want, people from places like Norway, white people. We don't want people from African countries or from Haiti. That's what's really symbolic here. Minion makes it clear that in the U.S. immigration debate, legality became a proxy for race without anyone overtly talking about it. Ryan Teague Beckwith and Maya Roden of Time magazine added their 2 cents worth to the discussion of the president's choice of words by choosing to discuss the immigration laws that occasioned Trump's telling words. They began the discussion this way. President Donald Trump's S-hole countries comment ricocheted around the world, spurring criticism from U.S. allies, rebuttals from Americans with roots in those countries, and condemnation from some in his own party. Reaction was swift around the world, including from those countries so characterized by the president. Zambia even humorously featured Trump's words in a tourism advertisement at Appeal. My Facebook friend thought that the president's words should occasion a deeper look at what these so-called S-hole countries were, how they were created, and why they continue to exist. And that is exactly what the contributors to this book do. Sort of like the proverbial turtle sitting on a fence post, you know these countries didn't get the way they are without some help. And it's precisely that help from the U.S., its allies, its multinational corporations, its military, and United Nations peacekeeping operations in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, which it also controls, on which this book focuses. Thus, the U.S. relationship to conditions in these countries is clear from U.S. military occupation of Haiti, financing of death squads in El Salvador, and support for dictators in all of them, indeed, all across the African continent. Therefore, for our purposes, an S-hole country is a country whose residents present quality of living conditions that can be tied to historical or current U.S. foreign and military policies that have negatively impacted the ability of that state to deliver quality of life policies to its residents. In this regard, for too many U.S. residents, the U.S. itself could be characterized as an S-hole country, resulting from its deliberate choice to fund the war machine and corporate policies that produce negative consequences for the countries and territories, in some cases colonies, that are profiled here. The United States, as itself a S-hole country, could be explored in much depth in future efforts. The characterization of certain countries as S-hole countries has captured the imagination of the global community, whether the localities and individuals concerned are for or against U.S. President Donald J. Trump. This book seizes this unique moment when attention of people inside and outside the U.S. is focused on the president's alleged words to explain the structure of international politics, the conditions inside certain countries, specific U.S. policies that created or maintain those conditions, and the consequence of those policies on U.S. residents themselves. How the U.S. Creates S-Hole Countries by Cynthia McKinney, or edited by.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. It's Anything Goes Friday. And John in Bethel, Maine. Hey, John. By the way, I have a question for you, John. I saw in the news this morning that Mainers are getting seriously PO'd with Susan Collins because Brett Kavanaugh yesterday, or the day before yesterday, voted to criminalize abortion in Louisiana, and to basically completely outlaw it, or just leave one doctor, I guess, left functioning in the state on very limited basis. Is that becoming a thing in Maine, or was that some outsider thinking that it was? John?
Hello?
Hey, John.
That was not funneled by the people in Maine at all. That is all out-of-state funding that boosted Sue Collins' fundraising this quarter.
No, my question was, the article that I read was that in Maine, people in Maine are seriously getting upset with Susan Collins, your senator, your Republican senator, because she voted to put Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, and yesterday or the day before, he voted to, criminalize abortion in Louisiana. Is there a big movement to kick her out or to not reelect her in 2020?
I will be shocked if she gets reelected in 2020.
That's reassuring news. So what'd you call about?
I called about messaging and the way that the Republicans are trying to use the word socialism and hang it around our necks.
Mm-hmm.
And, Republican messaging for years has been sort of spearheaded by a guy named Frank Luntz.
Right.
I think we need to also change our messaging and how we refer to him. He is a cunning linguist.
Mm-hmm.
He puts crazy ideas in people's heads. This pro-life versus, for anti-abortion, it's all a bunch of mislabeling.
Well, that happened long before Frank Luntz, but yeah.
That's true, but he's really put it in overdrive.
Yep.
My proposal is perhaps it's a really heavy lift to try to change people's ideas of what they think socialism means.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps we should just tie the anchor of antisocial around everybody else and see if we can sync them with it.
So you don't like socialism, you're antisocial.
Exactly.
I love it.
You don't like fire departments. You don't like ambulances.
Right. Amazing.
What's wrong with you? When your shore stops working, where are you going to poop?
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Bring it home to people.
I got it. John, an excellent one. Thank you very much for the call. Is Deborah Berger on the line? She is. Okay, great. Deborah Berger is with us. She's a registered nurse, co-president of National Nurses United, the website nationalnursesunited.org. And you can tweet her at dbergernnu or at National Nurses. Deborah, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having us on.
My pleasure. So tell me, what's going on with Medicare for All, and what role are National Nurses United playing? You're the largest union of nurses in the country, as I recall.
Well, what's going on in our world right now is that we're currently hosting 150 barnstorm meetings in 37 states organized all across the U.S., and they're part of an effort to ramp up our grassroots campaign to win Medicare for All. This includes nurses, patients, communities, very similar to town hall meetings across the country in preparation for Pramila Jayapal's introduction of Medicare for All. So the campaign has reached a tipping point, and we're really excited because now a growing majority of Americans, both Republican, Dems, and Independents, are supporting Medicare for All. And now that the Democrats have won control of the House of Representatives, we're following through on making our dream finally come true.
You mean Democrats have taken control if I heard that right. And this is starting tomorrow, February 9th through the 13th. So basically that's this weekend, right?
It's this weekend, and we're going to continue to have Medicare for All actions, but we really want the legislators to see that there is a groundswell of support for Medicare for All, and we can't allow politicians off the hook who actually ran a campaign saying that they supported Medicare for All.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you're going to hold Democratic politicians, hold their feet to the fire, essentially. So how can people find out about this, and how can they participate? Sorry?
Actually, you can go to www.medicareforall.org/actions.
Okay, and that's the number 4.
Yeah, the number 4. And you can sign up to get on our email. You can get the information there. You can even invite your family members to one of our barnstorms because it's going to take the work of everybody in our communities to make this a reality. You can also follow and like our campaign on Facebook, which is Fight to Win Medicare for All, and be part of this movement that is growing daily.
Yeah, and it really and truly is. Deborah Berger, co-president of National Nurses United. The new website for the barnstorm that's happening this weekend is medicareforall.org/actions. And Deborah, thank you for dropping by.
Okay, thank you.
It's great talking with you, and I wish you all the very best. Come back in a week or so and let us know how it worked out, okay?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. Fascinating stuff. Okay, back to Anything Goes Friday. Matt in Napa, California, listening on 9:10 a.m. out of San Francisco. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. So, I want to talk a little bit about socialism and how conservatives see it. They constantly contrast it with freedom, of course, and then just to digress momentarily, two of the main versions you can kind of identify socialism, state socialism, and then there's kind of Richard Wolff's version of socialism. Great that you have him on the show all the time, which is basically you maintain free enterprise, roughly speaking, but, you have cooperative organizations of those enterprises.
Changing the nature of business structures, yes.
Right, and so freedom, I think for most of us, our job is the main thing in our lives. The amount of freedom that we have at our jobs would really be the main indicator of how much freedom we have in our lives. And clearly, a cooperative system has a lot more freedom than, sole proprietors. Sorry. And then just real quickly on the Public Banking Institute initiative that I guess AOC is putting out a little bit. That seems to kind of refer to supporting local business a little bit. Stacy Mitchell, I don't know if you ever have her on the show, great representative of that Institute for Local Self-Reliance. A lot of times it gets turned into just sort of a marketing campaign for businesses a little bit. I think we need a little bit more of a genuine, organic community movement. I think it works in communities that are not totally large metropolitan cities a little bit better.
Well, in that regard, there's 3 really areas of focus. One is Bernie's suggestion that for the unbanked, for that 20% roughly of our population who are so poor that they can't have a bank account, that the post office should be able to do banking, postal banking at no charge for people. Then you've got community credit unions and locally owned banks, but in particular community credit unions. These are locally owned entities that are socialist organizations in the Richard Wolff meaning of the word, and then number 3, we need to break up the big banks. I mean, I'm down with all that. But back to your thing about freedom. Yes, the Republicans say you have a choice. You can have socialism or freedom, and the easy way to blow that up is what Franklin Roosevelt said: if you don't have a job, you are not free. If you don't have a home, you are not free. If you don't have the ability to feed yourself or to heal yourself when you are sick, you are not free. So all democratic socialism is doing is providing that foundation, that standing point, that base on which we can stand to be free. And Republicans, by wanting to take away our health care, are trying to diminish our freedom. by trying to reduce our wages, are trying to diminish our freedom, by trying to diminish our ability to join together to petition our employers or even confront our employers. They're diminishing our freedom. By saying that we don't have a right to housing and trying to do away with things like Section 8 housing, they're diminishing our freedom. By saying that if you don't have enough money to buy food, tough luck, starve, and trying to do away with food stamps, they're diminishing our freedom. And I think that's the way that this needs to be argued on an ongoing and continuous basis, Matt.
Yeah, very good, Tom.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Matt. Good to hear from you. Ronnie in Mesquite, Nevada. Hey, Ronnie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. First, I want to just say thank you for the work that you do. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was born in 1949, and I see what's going on today in it, and I pretty much feel 100% like you do, and I'm not only sad and upset, and I feel really bad because I remember I was in junior high school when Kennedy was running for president and became president, and there was a time when our country was on fire with excitement. And when people loved our president, and when all the comedians made jokes about our president, they were loving jokes that made you love.
Yeah, Von Meter and JFK. More. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was great, and we were going somewhere, and
then came Vietnam.
Yeah, then came Vietnam, and everything went downhill. It's been downhill all ever since then, and I feel like so many people have grown up not knowing what it was like, what it could be like. When we're going to go to the moon, when, then Cassius Clay was going to beat the baddest man in the planet and did it. And all these things were happening. And then, after Kennedy got assassinated, it continued a little bit because the Beatles hit. And then there was a couple of years when, the love thing was happening. But since then, it's all been downhill. And it's just a comment. I just feel bad that kids today can't experience a country that they can love their president.
I have a feeling at the very most within 5 years and probably, or 6 years, I guess, and probably within 2 years, kids are going to have somebody that they can look up to and respect and love, and you're going to have a government that starts working again. We are going to flush the corruption and evil of these billionaire-owned Republicans out of our body politic. I can feel it, Ronnie. I'm very hopeful for this. Ronnie, thank you for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And I think you're seeing the beginning of that process. When Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez goes on TV and just basically shuts down Chuck Todd. I mean, that was so cool. And welcome back. John, watching Free Speech TV in Cumberland, Maryland. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how are you today, Tom?
I am great, but I'll get better. How about you?
By the way, that moniker is brilliant, Chuck Todd.
Oh,
I watch that Wallace every afternoon. I love her.
Yeah.
And as soon as Toad comes on, I change the channel.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that again. I disagree with the idea of making fun of people's names and stuff like that, and it just came out.
It's like, well, forgive me for picking up on it.
I'm sorry.
What I've called about is that I'm a progressive Democrat. I was born in 1950. I am an advocate of a democratic socialism. But we progressives need to adopt a view of what I call realpolitik in the 2020 elections. We don't need to nominate a lightning rod candidate that will turn out a red wave of Republicans. Obama proved that a savior for president becomes powerless, once he can't govern, because there's been a big turnout and the Republicans fill up those seats in Congress, with people who won't budge. So I'm going to recommend something that may sound, a little off, and you can think about it, and maybe your viewers can think about it, but I think our ideal candidate for president would probably be a ticket that looks like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris or Beto and Kamala, because neither one of these guys, none of those candidates are going to be called socialists. They seem to have clean backgrounds. Unfortunately, Elizabeth Warren is cooked. When they found that application of hers, where she put down that she was Native American, that's not going away. She has been smeared. And then, you've got people like Kirsten Gillibrand, who they're going to call a flip-flopper. And it just goes on and on and on. So, and if we don't take a realpolitik view about our presidential candidate and work on the Congress, then we're going to have a situation, even if we get into the White House, we're not going to be able to govern.
Yeah. I think that, speaking of baggage, I think Joe Biden has every bit as much baggage, in fact, a hell of a lot more baggage than Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, the Native American thing, that is going to be a tough one for her to climb over, but I think, she could. But Joe Biden, I mean, he was the guy who badgered Anita Hill in those hearings. He's the guy who if he didn't write it, co-sponsored the bankruptcy bill that made it illegal for young people to discharge their student loans in bankruptcy. Joe Biden's got some serious problems that he's got to confront. And
yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't aware of those things in his past. Yeah. But I just know that, he seems like a good-hearted guy.
Yeah.
That's what he appears to be.
I think you might be right about Beto, but then, there's a lot of people who are looking at Beto with his, I'm traveling around the country, I'm kind of in a funk, I don't know what I'm doing. And it seems like, okay, we've got a young guy here who's still trying to figure out who he is and what the world is, and this guy's not ready to be president. I mean, that's very much the sense that I've gotten from reading a few profiles of him recently. And then you combine that with the fact that when he was in Congress, the 6 years he was in Congress, he was he refused to be part of the Progressive Coalition. He was right there with Joe Biden, I guess you could say. And I just don't think
non-lightning rod ticket.
I don't think that's going to turn out the Democratic base. I mean, maybe putting Kamala Harris on that ticket or putting her at the top of the ticket would do it. But Kamala Harris herself has some problems, with her criminal justice background, although she's done a very, very good job of speaking to that and pushing back on it. But at the end of the day, John, it's going to be up to the Democratic electorate. And I'm not telling people how to vote. I'm just trying to lay out what's going on. John, thank you for the call. Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday on the Thom Hartmann Program. Jeff in San Francisco, listening on AM 910. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
The thing, I bother you all the time about public banking, and I think that's how we could fund the Green New Deal.
I agree.
In fact, it's, there's tons of money there, and all the time I read Ellen Brown's book. She says people from outer space come down here and they say the planet's melting. Well, why didn't you guys fix this? And he says, well, there's this little green pieces of paper we didn't have,
right.
Money, and there's so much. I mean, so went to Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, and we're pushing for a public bank in San Francisco, and we could be the first one. And
you'd be the second one. South Dakota's had one, or North Dakota has had one since 1909. Yeah, okay, first city.
I remember the 7 words of failure I learned in econ. It's never been done that way before, and so it's never been done there that a city's had a public bank. But we have tons of money. I mean, the fact that you could pull money out of your own home in a form of equity. We have so many things paid for in San Francisco. So it's just using our resources in the correct way.
Well, you don't even need to borrow against your resources, Jeff. The banks just skim a small percentage off all the money that goes through. And San Francisco is probably running hundreds of, over the course of a decade, probably hundreds of billions of dollars through the New York banks right now. It's crazy.
Oh, of course. I think there's 11. Just in the fund, there's like 11 billion as far as in the pension funds.
Right.
And they could loan that out at 9 times the amount. That's what the banks do.
Yeah. And there you've got $100 billion that the city can work with.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wish she would, because she was big with Trinity Trandon in L.A. to start a public bank there. So, I mean, I do have a lot of hope there. I mean, I just watched her on a video, and she put on
her you're talking about is Ellen Brown?
No, AOC.
Oh, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay.
And she was, grilling some of these people about how the whole system is destroyed. How I mean, you can go in there and you could pass legislation as a congressperson for stock that you own. I mean, it was just brilliant how she just put these.
No, this woman is wicked smart. I mean, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if she could run for president, I would be out there campaigning for her right now. I mean, this woman is wicked smart.
I think 5 years she's going to be there.
I do.
I don't care.
I agree. I think she's going to be our first Hispanic president.
Yeah, and woman, and I think her ideas are just, she's going to build the momentum. So
yeah. Well, we may have a woman president before then, but we'll see. Jeff, I need to move along, but thank you for your call. Yes, spot on. Public banking, good stuff. John in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, John, what's up?
Hey, Tom, how are you today?
Good. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is this term about socialism, pretty much about the terminology that is used. And for the life of me, I think I spoke to you before. I would use some of the actions of Lee Atwater back at them. We are living in a quasi-fascist government. The Republicans have never written a bill that wasn't passed the Oak brothers or Alec or anyone else, which to me is fascism. They want us to live in a society in which the wealthy pretty much writes the laws and governs them.
Right. It's called oligarchy or plutocracy, and fascism is the merger of state and corporate interests, and we've got all of that stuff. Yeah. So how do you but the problem is, if you start using maybe we should start using the F word then, the fascism word.
That's the point, Tom. That's the point. We should use it.
Okay.
Because that's what it is. Call these guys out. Make them defend their fascist policies.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Actually, if they're going to call us socialists and make us defend our socialist policies, we should call them Okay, John, you got it. I'm going to start doing it. Thank you, John. Regina in Chicago. Hey, Regina, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I was telling you, your young lady that answered the phone, she asked me, she said, do you want to debate Tom? I said, no, I don't want to debate him. I just want to correct him a little bit, make him more informed about something. Monday, you made a comment about multi-level marketing as far as dealing with the DeVos family.
Yes.
And
they have skimmed billions and billions and billions of dollars off the top of a lot of middle-class families in Michigan that I knew.
Oh, yes.
I know people who got wiped out by Amway.
Yes. I agree. My family used to be involved with Amway. I got introduced into multi-level marketing at an early age, coming out of college, things like that.
Regina, we just have about 40 seconds here before we're going to hit the end of the hour. Can you make your point real quick?
Yeah. I use network marketing very successfully later on. I found out how Amway was tricking people back in the day and saw it, got reprimanded by them at some of their meetings they used to have, and I found a different way. And you have to be very careful of what company. It can be reputable. But like everything else as far as our subject matter goes, people got into networking and tried to destroy that too. And they started messing with the money and messing with the payout and trying to cheat people. And so
I get it. I mean, the upside of network marketing is that for people who otherwise can't find work, it's a way to make a living. I mean, I get that. And that just shouldn't be. We shouldn't have people who otherwise can't find work.
This is true.
But on the other hand, it's like turning your friends and family into customers. I've got some problems with it, but if it worked for you, Regina, God bless you, and good. I've got to wrap this up. I'm sorry, Regina, because we're hitting the top of the hour here. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America. Our book today is The 31-Day Food Revolution, Heal Your Body, Feel Great, and Transform Your World by Ocean Robbins, with a foreword by Joel Furman, MD. This is from the introduction. Let me call it like it is. We live in a toxic food culture. It's led us to epidemic rates of obesity, heart disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and Alzheimer's. Things have gotten so bad that most people think it's normal to have at least a few extra pounds around the middle, to depend on an ever-growing supply of prescription medications, and to lose a little more memory and mobility with every passing year. This may be typical, but it sure as heck doesn't have to be normal. Eating food is mandatory, but suffering from brain fog, living with ever-declining health, and feeling like crap are not. The fact is that right now, hundreds of millions of people are hurting from diseases that never, ever needed to happen in the first place. Dangerous changes have been made to our food supply in just the last 25 years that impact how your food is grown and processed and how safe it is to eat. The status quo is driving small farmers out of business, forcing animals to live in deplorable conditions, and producing food that's making us sick. The medical industry and the processed food industry are earning trillions of dollars in a system that's devastating lives and threatening the very future of life on our planet. It's my mission to help put an end to this madness by sharing the truth about food and helping eaters put it into action. That's why I founded the 500,000-plus member Food Revolution Network, and it's why I wrote the book you now hold in your hands. In some ways, I might seem like a pretty unlikely food revolutionary. After all, in 1953, my grandfather, Irving Robbins, joined with his brother-in-law, Bert Baskin, to found the 31 Flavors ice cream company, Baskin-Robbins. In case anyone on the planet missed the memo, we're now pretty clear that ice cream is not a health food. But back in the 1950s, as my grandpa was pumping out delicious flavors by the dozen, not much was known about the connection between food and health. Up until then, most people seemed content with 3 flavors, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. My grandfather was a consummate entrepreneur, and he set his heart on offering consumers many more options, 31 to be exact, one for each day of the month. My dad, John, grew up with an ice cream cone-shaped swimming pool. Sometimes he even ate ice cream for breakfast. He was groomed from early childhood to one day run the family company. My dad's youthful innovations included Jamocha Almond Fudge, one of our company's most iconic flavors to this day, and the rollout to all the stores of the famous pink spoons that enabled customers to enjoy free samples. But in 1967, my grandpa's brother-in-law and business partner, Bert Baskin, became very ill. His doctors informed him he was dying of heart disease. I never knew my great-uncle Bert because he passed on a short time later, 6 years before I was born. But I do know that he was one of the greatest entrepreneurs in American history. He had tremendous wealth, a business he enjoyed, and a family he loved. And he ate a lot of ice cream. And in the end, he lost his life and his health at the age of 54. Grandpa Irv was faced with a choice. He could sell the company for a large sum of money, or he could keep the company in the business and take on my dad, then about to turn 20, as a business partner. Grandpa Irv chose to invite his son aboard. But my dad declined his father's invitation, walking away from Baskin-Robbins and from any access to or dependence on the family wealth. For him, it was a choice for integrity, and it's a choice I've always respected. My dad had seen ice cream bring smiles to a lot of people, but he also knew that unhealthy foods could fuel devastating consequences, and he didn't want to spend his life selling a product that might contribute to more people suffering and dying before their time. So he left a path that was practically paved with gold and ice cream to follow his own rocky road. My dad had suffered from polio as a child and grew up frequently fatigued and ill, In the 1960s, he fell in love with my mom in Berkeley, and the two of them set out on a healthy living path. They stopped eating processed foods, they gave up ice cream, and they based their diets on vegetables and whole natural foods. As my dad's health and energy returned, he and my mom moved to a remote little island off the coast of British Columbia, Canada, where they built a one-room log cabin, grew most of their own food, practiced yoga and meditation for several hours a day, and named their kid Ocean. They say that they almost named me Kale. I'm glad they took the more conservative route on this one. In any case, we did eat a lot of kale, along with cabbage, carrots, onions, broccoli, turnips, Swiss chard, and many other vegetables that my parents grew, plus brown rice, sprouts, buckwheat, and beans. For a treat, once in a blue moon, we'd have a few drops of organic blackstrap molasses. I think we went through about a bottle a year. Though my childhood diet was Spartan and my family lived on very little money, I grew up feeling rich in health. I became an accomplished distance runner, completing my first marathon at the age of 10. My dad went on to study the impact of food choices and to share what he was learning. His landmark bestsellers, including Diet for a New America, inspired millions of people and helped to galvanize the modern health food movement. The media was tickled by the notion of a would-be ice cream heir becoming a healthy eating spokesperson and called him the rebel without a cone and the prophet of nonprofit. Tens of thousands of people wrote my dad letters, often by hand, sharing how his work had changed, sometimes even saved their lives. One of the lives his work impacted, as fate would have it, was that of my own grandpa Irv. Now, my grandpa had been pretty mad when my dad walked away from the ice cream company. He and my dad went years without speaking. But then something remarkable happened. In 1989, Grandpa Irv, then in his early 70s, was suffering from diabetes, heart disease, and weight problems. He'd always eaten the modern diet with a double scoop of ice cream on top. His cardiologist told him he didn't have long to live unless he changed his diet. And then the good doctor handed him a copy of my dad's book, the book 31-Day Food Revolution by Ocean Robbins.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, and Otis in Yorktown, Virginia. Hey, Otis, what's on your mind today?
Oh, a lot, Tom. I'm going to try to hit two things quickly and be short.
Okay.
Public banking. Back in the 70s, we found out that banks, regional banks, were giving predatory loans primarily to American descendants of slaves. There's a hashtag called ADOS, which is a group of us that have really been working for a long time to bring this to the fore. Most Americans call it divisive and label it identity politics. But the truth is, every other group in this country is advocating it for itself. What I have a problem with public banking, it sounds good on the surface, but with no details, you end up still getting predatory lending.
Well, why not just outlaw predatory lending right across the board for any bank? I mean, you know.
Well, you say for any bank.
And don't you think that a community bank would be more responsive to the community? I mean, if the bank was owned by the city?
This is what I'm trying to say to you. It should be, but the details matter, and I didn't want to get into details of it. I literally had to fight for my father as a government employee because of local, when it was regional banks here, when I started going through his paperwork.
Right, but those were, Otis, those were private for-profit banks. There's never before in the United States, to the best of my knowledge, there's never in our history been a bank owned by a city, and that's what San Francisco is proposing to do. If the city owns it, then, you know, if you got a problem, you can go to the city council meeting. I mean, right now, if you've got a problem with Wells Fargo and you even try to protest, you might get arrested.
Okay, I take that as a given. My point to you is the same thing happened with the Langley Credit Union when I was military and he was just an employee. But here's another thing. But
the credit union, again, only responds to its customers. It doesn't respond to the public. And so if it's going to say that they're going to keep some of the customers out because of their race or because of where they live, you know, you're dialing back the ability to make change within the credit union. But a city is all the people who live in the city.
So the given is, you think if the government running it as a city, is it going to make sure that there's no predatory lending?
I don't think anything will make sure that there's no predatory lending, but I think it would radically increase the public accountability of the bank.
Okay, and my point again was that's why details matter. Now let's hit another thing quickly because I know you're short on time. AOC, I like a lot of things she's doing, but if you listen to the Ta-Nehisi Coates interview from her at the Atlantic, she made claims that she thinks reparations are a good thing. She says it should be for everybody. But she says specifically that it should be targeted to the era when harm was compounded by redlining and predatory lending. How can you tell a people that I will be allies with you if you start your reparations theory based on the 1930s or the 40s when we, as American descendants of slaves, have a reparations tort that goes back to 1619 when Angela first set foot on this continent?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good ally, and it sounds like you're trying to dictate, once again in America, that for me to make my specific claim is divisive. I cry foul on that, and that is what I have experienced and my people have experienced in this country from day one.
I understand, Otis, and I agree with you. I understand your perspective, and I largely share it. What I would say is, if any politician, let's take AOC out of the discussion, if any politician comes along and says, yeah, I'm in favor of reparations, but on a limited basis. Let's start in 1930 and just do reparations based on who got screwed out of redlining or something like that. What that says to me is that that person is willing to engage in a conversation and that you will have an opportunity to hopefully change their minds, enlighten them, inform them, expand the conversation. That's a hell of a lot better than the vast majority of both Democratic and of all the Republicans and probably the vast majority of Democratic politicians who are saying, we don't even want to talk about reparations. I mean, at least AOC is willing to talk about them.
Okay.
She's got her own idea about them, but that means that you can try to influence her.
And let me give you a quick rebuttal. I agree with you there, but let me go back to two black candidates that are running, Booker and Harris. My problem with them is each time they're asked a question in the public limelight about what would they do to help blacks, they pivot away from it and start talking about all Americans want this, all Americans want that. All Americans are not disproportionately being shot by cops. All Americans have not been redlined and their property taken away from them. Everyone from Haley Barbour, when he was doing it throughout the South, and Andrew Young when he was in Atlanta. When they come and talk about privatization or infusion of private money, black people get disenfranchised from their land and have no wealth building, but white people who have the same problem with Haley Barbour down in the South privatizing water, sewer, and other public services, at least they got to keep their land.
Yeah. Otis, you and I have a luxury. You and I have a luxury that Kamala Harris and Cory Booker don't have. We're not running for political office, and we don't require roughly 70% of the population being white people to support us. I'm just doing a show. You're just calling into a show. I don't mean just but minimizing it. But neither one of us are having to do outreach to a large number of people, particularly a large number of white people, which Kamala Harris and Cory Booker have to do if they want to become president. So I'm willing to cut them a little slack if they're not, going full. We've got to do everything right now. And I realize that kind of rhetoric historically has kept things where they are and has been very destructive. But somebody called, in the last hour and said, we've really got to understand real politics here. We've got, and I think in this regard, they're, I don't know. Again, I'm not being an African American. I don't think that I even have a, standing to criticize them for their positions on race, frankly.
Tom, a quick response. What America's not going to understand is if they don't include us, American descendants of slaves will break away from the Democratic Party and the whole nation will take a dive. So good luck, and I love your work.
Okay, thanks a lot, Otis, and I get what you're saying. Rob in Mesa, Arizona. Hey, Rob, socialism?
Yeah, I think anytime, because, being liberals and progressives, we overthink the issue and try to discuss it too much.
Yeah.
We got to keep it simple. And every time someone on the other side brings up anything to do with socialism, just respond with this. So, you're not for the troops or military. That's all you have to say. If we get into these long discussions, you lose people. There's a reason.
But then they come back. This is how the libertarians come back. They go, yeah, but you've got to figure out a way to protect your country, and so we're in favor of an army, but we're not in favor of anything else. And it's like, how do you respond to that?
And there's a reason why Fox News use beautiful people, whooshing sounds, and flashy graphics. So just keep it simple when you respond. You're not for the troops or the military on social issues.
Okay, I got
Thanks,
it. Rob, thanks a lot. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's up?
Yeah.
Hey, Maine, you're on the air.
Lobster taco.
Maine is somehow not figuring that. That's unusual. Steve, Maine's on line 7, sure. Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, good morning, everybody. I want to talk about Bernie here, but just two quick points here. One is AOC. She rocks, and we absolutely love her. And number two is, I haven't heard this from me in a little over 2 years, is in the community we live in down here, where there's about 40 Canadians I've spoken to in the last dozen years. And they've got second homes here. They're wealthy enough to have that. Their taxes haven't hurt them enough. They've got second winter homes here, and they absolutely love their health care.
Yeah.
So
this is the thing. And I realize that every time I say this, I sound like the old geezer. But I grew up in a neighborhood in Lansing, Michigan. The dad, it was a tract, tract housing, I guess is what they called it back in the day. It was built right after World War II in the very early 1950s. And Dad bought this house, this 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, all on one level, little ranch house, for $13,000, as I recall. When Dad died, my brother sold it, I think, for $90,000. So that's the kind of neighborhood I grew up in, right? And in South Lansing, and probably half the people in my neighborhood worked at General Motors. Dad did, or in some cases, Mom. And I would say pretty much everybody had a new car every 2 or 3 years. And probably, I know of 4 or 5 people on my block, which was maybe 12 houses, 14 houses or something like that, who had summer cottages up in northern Michigan. I mean, that was just a common thing among working class people who worked in factories in Lansing in the 1950s and 60s, was that they had a second home in northern Michigan. And so it doesn't surprise me that Canadians, you live in Phoenix, that Canadians are coming down and buying second homes. They still have that economy. Canada never went Ronald Reagan. Europe never went Ronald Reagan. Only the United States and the United Kingdom went Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, screw the middle class, destroy the manufacturing jobs. And so it makes sense, Steve, that Canadians can buy a second home in Phoenix.
Well, that's right, and my story comports with yours too. I grew up in Madison, and my folks bought their first house in 1960. Paid about $17,000, and it's the same, pretty much the same story. But anyways, I want to move forward here, just saying. I'd like to see Bernie run. There's a meme out there that he's too old, and but the fact of the matter is, a lot of people want to see Joe Biden. But Joe Biden is only 1 year younger than Bernie,
right.
And so that meme about Bernie being too old can be put to bed right now.
Well, and Donald Trump's only 2 years younger than Bernie, isn't he?
I think it's 1 year.
Okay, so
it's 1 year, I believe.
Yeah,
and also I'd like to see
enough already.
Yeah. I'd like to see his running mate being Sherrod Brown of Ohio, because Ohio's a swing state, and I think Sherrod could pull in a lot of people. What do you think, Tom?
I think Sherrod Brown is a hell of a great candidate. I do think, though, that the ticket this year is almost certainly going to have a woman or a person of color or both, which would be, probably Kamala Harris, on it. And I think that that's a good thing, too. I think that kind of diversity is increasingly important, both in our party and for our country, particularly as we're going through this roiling upheaval of having a naked, open racist in the White House and having most of the Republican Party absolutely aggressively embrace that racism. We need to push back in not just meaningful ways, but also in symbolic ways. Steve, thanks a lot for the call. Great conversation. We'll be back. It's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, 17 minutes and change past the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here on the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be back with your calls on Anything Goes Friday. And welcome back. Oh, by the way, in the chat room, somebody asked a question. The question was, will AOC's endorsement hold weight in the primaries? And this is from Pop Reality. Will AOC's endorsement hold weight in the primaries? Yes. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has become a force in the Democratic Party. In many ways, she is leading the Democratic Party. I'm telling you, this woman is going far. She is smart as a whip. She understands what she's talking. She's the first Democratic politician of any consequence that I know of who actually understands modern monetary theory. I mean, you know, it's like, it's not just that she's good, she's great. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But yes, I believe that that's the case. Ben, in Pinos Altos, New Mexico. Am I saying it right, Ben?
Yes, you are, Tom. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate all that you do for us. Anyway, I've been listening to you for about a year and a half. I think got about 1,000 of your programs on my tape thing. I just became a citizen this last year just because of you and what I learned through you. And anyway, the reason I called, the only reason I called was to encourage your voters. I've started doing this in New Mexico, and it's called the Thom Hartmann 2-Week Challenge. And what it is, basically, is I invite everybody to watch their own news and then watch your take of what's going on in the news, so that way they can compare. So I just encourage all the visitors out there, all your listeners out there, to whoever they talk to, whether it's their friends or somebody, an acquaintance, ask them to take the Thom Hartmann 2-Week Challenge.
Okay.
And do that.
And the first question should be, do you have Dish or DirecTV, or do you have a good internet connection? Because you can watch Free Speech TV on Dish, on Direct. It's absolutely free. It's part of the basic package. And if you've got a decent internet connection, you can watch it at freespeech.org.
Right. No, I understand. I'm just saying, what's his name? Limbaugh. He has about 20 million listeners or something like that.
I think
he's been around since 87.
Yeah.
And if it was up to me, I'd run you for president.
Well, thank you, Ben.
You just got such a knowledge base in your head.
Thank you. I think that Talkers Magazine is rating Rush Limbaugh's audience at 13 million, as I recall, and my audience at around 5.6 million. I think both those numbers are probably a little larger than what's real, but I don't know. I mean, we're pretty slammed, and I have and our advertisers, which is the commercial side of our business, seem to be doing well. So I'm guessing that maybe those numbers actually, there's something to them.
Right. No, I'm just saying that in comparison. I'm just saying for what you say and what you know, what you bring to us on the TV or on the radio or YouTube, whatever. It's like it's so knowledgeable, and I want people to push people listening to you comparing to what they get on the stupid corporate TV news, that kind of stuff, the entertainment news.
Yeah.
And that's my whole deal.
And I would add, if you're going to do that, Ben, I would add Amy Goodman to that, because she does such a great job of actually doing the news. I mean, she's a real reporter. I'm just a commentator.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, you're a very good commentator. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your kind words, and thanks for watching Free Speech TV. It's 21 and change past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, talk media for the rest of us. Just did a rant about how we have actually passed a major climate change tipping point that we can't walk back from. We can't stop it. This is coming now. It is unstoppable. This first step of it, which has to do with, the destruction of major cities in the United States and all around the world. You can check this out over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, or for people who support us on YouTube as well, you can see this. Get over to patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN to check this out. We're talking about how prior to a couple of years ago, and this is how, tipping points, you can only see them in the rearview mirror. Prior to a couple of years ago, in the winter, the Antarctic and Greenland would recover some of their ice. Now they're not even doing that. It's just pausing. The melting is just pausing. That's that tipping point. And the consequences of this are going to be terrible. Check it out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. Welcome back. Anything Goes Friday. Maine in Chicago. Hey, Maine, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good.
Yeah, right. I wanted okay, my thing is, okay, socialism and communism, and the difference between a democracy of socialism is different from that of communism socialism, because here in America, what we have is, which we allow through our democracy, is capitalism. And capitalism wants to privatize all that we have as far as social programs. And when we insist that these social programs be non-profit or something, then they want to claim, well, that's communism.
Right.
But our communism is not, I call it American communism is not like, I don't call it communism. I call it democracy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because democracy is all for one and one for all. And what we have here now is where the few are ruling the many. Our democracy doesn't even fit the dictionary definition of what a democracy is supposed to be like. And all this is because of the Electoral College. We have allowed this Electoral College to put in the few to override, to rule the many.
Yeah, George W. Bush lost the election by 500,000 votes. Donald Trump lost the election by 3 million votes, but they both sat in the Oval Office.
And I'll be telling them, the 3 million, you look at 3 million votes, that's the city of Chicago. Get a perspective.
Yeah.
That's the city of Chicago. That's every man, woman, and including child who voted in Chicago, but their vote didn't count because of
the Electoral College.
Electoral College and and we have to free this republic from our vote, because the vote is the most important thing in a democracy. If you don't have the vote that's free and clear from restraint and suppression, then your democracy is not true, and we'll have what we have going on now. And we need to go toe to toe, and not just we go high and they go low, because we have to go toe to toe on every issue.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I'm actually, I'm writing a book right now about the Republican war on voting, and so over the last weekend I did a deep dive into the Electoral College and went back and actually read James Madison's notes from the Constitutional Convention. And there was a 5-day period where these guys were beating each other up and fighting over how does the president, does he serve for 6 years, for 4 years, for life? Alexander Hamilton wanted it to be for life. How does he get to be president? Is he elected by Congress? Is he elected by the Senate? Is he elected by the people? The conclusion they came to was that the people couldn't elect the president because the country was too spread out. It took too long for word to travel. So the compromise was they would have this college of wise elders who would actually get to know the candidates for president. And then they would, be advised by the people with their votes, but they actually had the right to vote for whoever they wanted. And, it was a noble idea in some ways, but it also, it brought us 4 out of the first 5 presidents were Virginia slaveholders. Right. And because of the Electoral College. Now it wasn't just the Electoral College. The Electoral College had that structure because of the 3/5 compromise. And that was the reality in America right up until after the Civil War. But we still, we have this vestige of both slavery and of the inability of them to come up with a straightforward way to elect the president. And the fact that there was no electricity back then, it's time to update it. Maine, thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Amazing little anecdote. On July 10th, 1787, while they were debating the Electoral College inside the hall in Philadelphia, outside the hall, a crowd was killing a woman as a witch. Our book today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. This is from the chapter, it starts with the chapter, A Life Edit, on page 4. I was scared. I couldn't not be. Being scared is what anxiety is all about. The bouts are coming closer and closer. I was worried where I was heading. It seemed there was no upper limit to despair. I tried to distract myself out of it. However, I knew from past experience alcohol was off limits, so I did the thing that had helped before to climb out of a hole. the thing I forget to do in my day-to-day life. I was careful about what I ate. I did yoga. I tried to meditate. I lay on the floor and placed my hand on my stomach and inhaled deeply, in, out, and noticed the stuttery rhythm of my breath. But everything was difficult. Even choosing what to wear in the morning made me cry. It didn't matter that I had felt like this before. A sore throat doesn't become less sore simply because you felt it before. I tried to read, but found it hard to concentrate. I listened to podcasts. I watched new Netflix shows. I went on social media. I tried to get on top of my work by replying to all my emails. I woke up and clasped my phone and prayed that whatever I could find there would take me out of myself. But, spoiler alert, it didn't work. I began to feel worse, and many of the distractions were doing nothing but driving me further to distraction. And T.S. Eliot's phrase from his 4 quartets, I was distracted from distraction by distraction. I would stare at an unanswered email with a feeling of dread and not be able to answer it. Then on Twitter, my go-to digital distraction of choice, I noticed my anxiety intensify. Even just passively scrolling my timeline felt like an exposure of a wound. I read news websites, another distraction, and my mind couldn't take it. The knowledge of so much suffering in the world didn't help put my pain in perspective. It just made me feel powerless and pathetic that my invisible woes were so paralyzing that when there were so many visible woes in the world. My despair intensified. So I decided to do something. I disconnected. I chose not to look at social media for a few days. I put an auto response on my emails too. I stopped watching or reading the news. I didn't watch TV. I didn't watch any music videos. Even magazines I avoided. During my initial breakdown years before, the bright imagery of magazines always used to linger and clog my mind with feverish racing images as I tried to sleep. I left my phone downstairs when I went to bed. I tried to get outside more. My bedside table was cluttered with a chaos of wires and technology and books I wasn't really reading. So I tidied up and took them away too. In the house, I tried to lie in darkness as much as possible, the way you might deal with a migraine. I had always, since I was first suicidally ill in my 20s, understood that getting better involved a kind of life edit, a taking away. As the minimalist advocate Fumio Sasaki put it, there's a happiness in having less. In the early days of my first experience of panic, the only things I had taken away were booze and cigarettes and strong coffees. Now, though, years later, I realized that a more general overload was the problem, a life overload, and certainly a technology overload. The only real technology I interacted with during this present recovery, aside from the car and the cooker, were yoga videos on YouTube, which I watched with the brightness turned low. The anxiety didn't miraculously disappear, of course not. Unlike my smartphone, there is no slide to power off function for anxiety. But I stopped feeling worse. I plateaued. And after a few days, things began to calm. The familiar path of recovery arrived sooner rather than later. And abstaining from stimulants, not just alcohol and caffeine, but these other things, was part of the process. I began, in short, to feel free again. Most people know the modern world can have physical effects, that despite advances, aspects of modern life are dangerous for our bodies. Car accidents, smoking, air pollution, a sofa-dwelling lifestyle, takeout pizza, radiation, that 4th glass of Merlot. Even being at a laptop can pose physical dangers. Sitting down all day, getting an RSI. Once I was even told by an optician that my eye infection and blocked tear ducts were caused by staring at the screen. We blink less, apparently, when working on a computer. So as physical health and mental health are intertwined, couldn't the same be said about the modern world and our mental states? Couldn't aspects of how we live in the modern world be responsible for how we feel in the modern world? Not just in terms of the stuff of modern life, but its values too. The values that cause us to want more than we have, to worship work above play, to compare the worst bits of ourselves with the best bits of other people, to feel like we always lack something. And as I grew better day by day, I began to have an idea about a book. This book right here. I've already written about my mental health and reasons to stay alive, but the question now was not why should I stay alive? The question this time was a broader one. How can we live in a mad world without ourselves going mad? As I began researching, I quickly found some attention-grabbing headlines for an attention-grabbing age. Of course, news is almost always designed to stress us out. If it was designed to keep us calm, it wouldn't be news, it would be yoga or a puppy. So there's an irony about news companies reporting on anxiety while also making us feel anxious. Anyway, here are some of the headlines. Stress and social media fuel mental health crisis among girls, from The Guardian. Chronic loneliness is a modern-day epidemic, from Forbes. Facebook may make you miserable, says Facebook, Sky News. Steep rise in self-harm among teenagers, from the BBC. And on it goes. The book Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. By the way, you know, the last 2 years of Barack Obama's presidency, Mitch McConnell would not allow hearings, or made hearings very difficult, on federal judges. And in those last 2 years, only 2 federal judges were, made it through the Senate. Obama appointees. Everybody else, he appointed, I think close to 100 federal judges, or more than 100 federal judges, but only 2 of them ever had a hearing. And Merrick Garland never had a hearing. That was the Supreme Court. This is what Mitch McConnell did. Yesterday, one day, Mitch McConnell pushed through 44 lifetime federal judges, all of them from the Federalist Society. So all of them hardcore right-wing trolls who will be on our federal bench for the rest of their lives. Nobody is talking about this, and I find it shocking. And obviously there's nothing we can do about it. This is just pure power politics, and Mitch McConnell doesn't give a rat's ass about democracy or what's best for the country. But this is amazing. And I got this email this morning from Team Trump. Dear Fred Flintstone, we have massive, that's in all caps, massive drugs flooding into our country. MS-13 gang members pouring through the weak spots on our border, and terrorists threatening our national security. Democrats in Congress refuse to acknowledge the, all caps, crisis at our southern border simply because they want to harass, in caps, harass our great president. The fake news media, capital FNM, and Democrats want to call this a manufactured crisis, in quotes. But that is just a manufactured soundbite they worked on together to obstruct our agenda. If we asked the families of every American citizen who had lost a loved one due to illegal immigration if this is a manufactured crisis, what do you think they'd say? Absolutely not, all caps. If Democrats refuse to work with the president, he will have no choice but to declare this a national emergency for the sake of our country. But before he takes this, all caps, critical decision, he wanted to get your input, Fred. Should President Trump declare a national emergency to build the wall? Click here, take the poll now, and be directed to our webpage where you can make a donation. Right. That last part I added, but that's exactly what it is. So, anyhow, just a heads up on what's going on. Tim in Mesick, Michigan. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Hey, Tim. Or Tim.
Hey, Tim, it's Tom. What's up?
You caught me off guard, brother. I was going to say, hey, Tom, Tim here. You grew up in Lansing?
That's right.
I grew up in a neighborhood where from my second-story apartment window I could see that luscious resort island called Zug Island.
Zug Island? What's that?
And anyway, I'm a retired 57-year-old machinist.
Okay.
And I've got a very serious story to tell you about the tax benefits of all the jobs created. But before I get to that, the fellow that was bringing up Elizabeth Warren's thing and how that could be a detriment,
mm-hmm.
I love Elizabeth Warren. I love Bernie, but that, what's her name? AOC?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God, I wish she had like 6 years under her belt and was old enough to run.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, Louise and I were talking about that walking into work this morning, and she's like, she should be president. And I'm like, yeah. But she does need, the Constitution says you got to be 35 to be president, although Louise pointed out she could still, I think, run for vice president. But then if the president left, she couldn't serve because she's not 35, or that's my understanding of it. But I think, having 6 years of legislation under her belt will make her a more, well-informed, well-rounded, although there's no doubt in my mind that she's already well-informed and well-rounded. But anyhow, back to you, Tim.
Like any trade, she needs some seasoning.
Yeah, Yeah.
But
I agree.
anyway, now as far as that thing about Elizabeth Warren, run, Elizabeth. You got my full support, just like Bernie had.
Yeah, I'm with you.
The thing is, and if Trump brings that up, if he's not in jail, okay, really? Well, let me tell you something there. I believed my parents when they told me, because they were hard-working, honorable people. Herr Trump, you don't even have the last name that you were your family was born with.
Yeah.
So don't talk to me when your grandfather was marching in Ku Klux Klan rallies in New York City.
Well, and she might have claimed to be an Indian when she's not. He claimed to be a billionaire when he's not.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
but you wanted to talk about, you had a union busting story, Tim. There's a lot of other people who want to get in here. I want to wrap this up. What did you want to say about union busting and tax breaks?
Yeah, I'm retired, and I've worked at newspapers, and I just got a very disturbing call. A friend of mine from the place I retired from got busted down from a foreman, and he was a damn good journeyman, a good foreman, and one of the journeymen retired, and rather than hire another journeyman, the paper decided, well, we'll bust this guy down from foreman to fill the contract instead of hiring another journeyman. Now, I thought all these tax breaks were going to create more good-paying jobs because all these businesses saving money on taxes are going to hire people. Well, I'm here to tell you right now, I just heard firsthand how well that plan has worked out, and I am mad.
Yeah.
I am mad as hell.
Yeah, it was a crime, really, the GOP tax scam. What it produced was $1 trillion in stock buybacks, which are simply ways of manipulating the stock market or an individual stock's price that were illegal before the Reagan presidency. It was illegal to manipulate your stock's price by buying back shares prior to the 1980s. And Reagan changed all that, and so Trump says, hey, we're going to borrow $1.5 trillion, enough to wipe out all the student debt in America. We're going to borrow that money, and we're going to give it to the billionaires. And then for people like you, Tim, and your friends who work in the machine shop, if you were able to deduct a uniform expense, this is particularly for police officers and firefighters. They used to be able to deduct the cost of their uniforms. They used to be able to deduct the dry cleaning bills. They used to be able to deduct the cost of their gun and their ammunition belt and stuff like that if it wasn't provided by the force. Truck drivers, basic expenses having to do with your work, you used to be able to deduct, and the Republicans did away with all of those deductions. And right now, millions of Americans, as they're doing their taxes, are discovering how badly the Republicans screwed them, how badly Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and Mike Pence screwed them. And they're seriously pissed off, too. So, Tim, I'm with you. And hopefully we'll see this show up in the ballot box. Tim, thanks a lot for the call and for sharing your story. David in Naugatuck, Connecticut. Am I saying it right, David?
Naugatuck, Connecticut.
Naugatuck.
I just wanted to call in and say I'm against the socialism of the rich.
Okay.
I have a list I'll go through quickly. There's $40 to $50 trillion in what I call fixed determinable debt. That's debt outside of the federal debt, which can be rolled over. This is debt that can't be forgiven. It has to be paid.
You're talking corporate debt and personal debt in
debt,
aggregate in the United States?
State and local debt, household debt,
right?
Everything except for federal debt, which I think is at $22 trillion.
Right.
Which really, if you take the MMT, is not really debt. It's just a historical record of what was paid out in the past.
Right.
But this debt can't be rolled over. Includes the $9 trillion of corporate debt, which leads me to Ford. Ford borrowed, I don't know the exact figure, but they used it to finance corporate executives. And when you buy a car, 10 to 20 cents on the dollar goes to bondholders.
Right.
And in the last crisis, they picked bondholders over union employees.
Yep.
The Affordable Care Act is based on cost-based financing. I know everyone likes to relish in the 80-20 split, and it used to be 60-40 or 50-50. However, it doesn't really matter because all the cost controls went away, and when you increase the cost of something, such as a hospital visit, specialist, that's a greater percentage going to the health insurers.
Mm-hmm.
And another form of socialism for the rich, no one is really picking up on reporting on this, but when Trump says he wants to lower drug prices by increasing the drug prices in other countries.
Right.
It's probably an act of war, and it won't work.
No, it won't. Other countries are not going to put up with it. We're the only country in the world that allows these pharmaceutical companies to rip off our people. By the way, I don't know if you saw this in today's Financial Times. It's by Gillian Tett. The headline, America faces a battle to find buyers for its bonds. And this came out of Goldman Sachs. America will need to sell an eye-popping $12 trillion of bonds in the next decade. This will pose a unique challenge for the Treasury. Who on earth is going to buy that looming mountain of treasuries? In 5 years' time, the Treasury will need to sell bonds equivalent to 25% of GDP, up from 15% now. This level of debt in the United States has only occurred twice in the past 120 years, after the Civil War and after the 2008 crash. And this hedge fund warned in a letter to clients, quote, what if investors don't want to make that shift? What if they don't want to buy that many bonds? What do you think?
Well, according to Ellen Brown, we can just print a coin and retire it all.
Yeah, I know, but I'm not sure that. In fact, I'm quite sure that that's not how it's going to play out.
Right.
You know, they're going to say no. We've got to pay these bonds. We've got to resolve this debt. And
well, it all comes down to whether we're going to have a democracy or not, or. You're optimistic.
Well, I think it comes down to whether we're going to have an economy or not. I mean, this particularly with, Republicans in office, that they might see this as an opportunity, a crisis as an opportunity rather than a problem. David, I'm with you. No socialism for the rich. Amen. Thank you very much for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour. We're going to check in with Talk Media News in about 4 minutes and find out what's going on in the world today, so stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the Thom Hartmann Program, your talk media for the sane among us. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Let's see here, Gary in Los Angeles. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind today?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've been hearing you say a lot lately about thinking that property taxes shouldn't be used to fund schools. And I just wanted to, put in my 2 cents worth. I lived in Southern California in the 60s, went to public schools, and they were the best public schools in the country. Mm-hmm. We moved to Florida in 1970. I moved back to California, to L.A. here, in 99, and was shocked to learn that the only state in the country that had worse public schools than California at this time was Mississippi.
Yeah, probably Prop 13 had something to do with that.
Exactly.
Because it froze property taxes.
Yep, Howard Jarvis, the far right-wing, old white guy, anti-tax person, conned California in 1978.
Well, he was a lobbyist for the real estate industry. I mean, he was a shill for the real estate industry. This was all about commercial real estate. Then that's how it's really played out. They used, that little old lady, I forget her name now. They used her in their ads, but this was really about, stopping the increase in property taxes on commercial real estate.
And a lot of people, including myself, believe that it was really the wealthy white racists in California who didn't want to fund schooling for little black and brown kids.
Sure.
I'm an old white guy, but I'm a supporter of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of other old white people who have similar attitudes.
Yeah.
Democratic socialists.
Yep.
There are a lot of us out here.
Yep.
And Jarvis, though, is still active here in California, and he's still doing everything he can to eliminate any taxes he can.
Howard Jarvis is still alive?
Yeah.
Really?
Or at least his organization is.
I think I thought he died like 20 years ago. I mean, he was an old man in the 70s when he was pushing Prop 13.
That I'm not sure of, but there is still the Howard Jarvis organization that's constantly coming out and opposing any taxes.
Yeah.
But like I say, it was property taxes to a large extent that funded the California public schools, and they were the best in the country, and they were integrated. You know, I moved to Florida where they were supposedly integrated, but all the black kids were in separate classes.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, Sean just looked it up. Howard Jarvis has been dead for a while. But, you know, it makes sense that his organization would live on. And among, you know, hardcore right-wingers and libertarians in California, he still has a good name, presumably, because, you know, he froze taxes. Kneecapped the state, but froze taxes, property taxes.
Yep. But like I say, that meant the demise of
Do you think,
California
Gary,
schools.
do you think, you know, I know that there's been talk for years about overturning Prop 13, whether by ballot initiative or by legislative fiat. Do you think it's going to happen?
I certainly hope so. There is a move in that direction now, and I believe there is a bill coming up that would not do away with Prop 13, but would amend it to hopefully make it better.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how they'd have to do it, you know, if they're doing it legislatively. Gary, thanks for the call, and thanks for listening to us there in L.A. It is coming up on 10 minutes before the hour. We're going to check in with Luke Vargas. We'll talk media news in just a moment. Stick around. You know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
What's going on in the world today? This report brought to you by GoatsForTheOldGoat.com and Loving What You Do, Ellen Ratner's new book. Hey, Luke.
Hi, I'm glad to be with you.
Great to have you. So what's going on in the world today?
Well, I was going to focus on Khashoggi for a minute, and now I'm looking at some of the other stories I want to talk about. So I'll keep it really brief. The White House has evidently ignored a request from the Senate, from a bipartisan group of senators, including Bob Corker and Bob Menendez, who demanded that by today, the White House start another investigation, in particular into exactly which people within the Crown Prince's inner circle may have been responsible for the murder of the journalist, as a way of trying to figure out if sanctions needed to be expanded against targeted sanctions against those people. And the White House, in a statement that's been communicated to the Senate, has said, we respect your request, which senators think is a legal demand, not just a polite request, but they are going to ignore it, citing instead that they will continue, to the best of their ability, to brief Congress on the latest American intelligence, but they don't want to actually do what these bipartisan members are asking for. And bear in mind, you've had legislation introduced today in the Senate that would actually force the government to, so they would actually put some legal muscle behind this demand. I think the support for that will increase in the coming hours as it seems. Now,
like Jeff Bezos seems to be implying that Saudi Arabia might be who hacked his cell phone to share that information with the National Enquirer so that Mr. Pecker could try to blackmail him. Do you take that? Do you interpret that way? And do you think that might be the thing that will break this open?
The folks that I follow in that field have been trying to apply the brakes on that story before we know more. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not a possibility. I think, though, it's, the conclusions of Bezos's private investigation need to be reviewed, I think, and before
well,
we can
that makes sense.
give them
It
credit.
just sounds reasonable. I note here that I just got your email. A top Australian court has blocked a new coal mine because it's going to worsen climate change. Now, there's this woman. I'm not sure I ever knew her name, but there's this woman who's the richest woman in Australia, and she is the heir to a mining fortune, including coal mining. And she has played a huge role. I mean, she's kind of the Koch brothers of Australia, a huge role in supporting right-wing politicians and fighting any efforts to stop climate change in Australia. Is this a refutation of her?
Well, this is a great ruling. I wasn't aware of the one you're talking about. I mean, there has been concerns in repeated Australian governments in the past few years that they signed up for things at Paris that the governments don't actually want to implement. This is a step in a very different direction. This is an open pit coal mine that was going to be built in New South Wales. There was basically a community level nonprofit legal center called the Environmental Defenders Office for New South Wales that stepped in here and filed petitions on behalf of people in the town where this was going to be built, and said, you've got to stop this. And as of today, the Land and Environmental Court of New South Wales, and I guess this cannot be appealed, which is good news, has said this cannot be built. And what's really historic here, and I'm starting to do some interviews today to try and get sort of a broader perspective on this, but it sounds like one argument that the judge made has been used before and is not quite as revelatory, which is that this is the wrong place for such a project, that this open pit mine is in a scenic area, close to homes and farms. It's going to have a social impact. But the other one is it's the wrong time. And I'm going to quote here. He says, it's the wrong time to build this because greenhouse gas emissions at the coal mine and its coal product will increase global total concentrations of greenhouse gases at a time when it is urgently needed in order to meet generally agreed climate targets. A rapid decrease in greenhouse gas emissions is needed here, basically. And on those grounds, this project needs to be refused. That's historic because nobody is predicting. You can move the you can move the mines elsewhere, right? And probably put it out in the desert where nobody's home is going to be covered in dust because of it. But is there going to be a time in the foreseeable future when the situation's different? Probably not. And really key also to what the judge is saying here is he rejected an appeal by the coal mine company, the operator, that basically, hey, this isn't really a coal mine because we're buying all these carbon offsets and going to do some reforestation. He says you cannot basically, claim to offset a known contributor to global warming and then offset it with a hypothetical alternative, and that
this
we
lipstick
have
ain't
no
helping that
assurance you're
pig.
actually going to do this.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So Finland has done a 2-year experiment nationwide with the universal basic income. What happened?
They found there's 2 more years to go. They picked 2,000 people from their mid-20s to their mid-50s, gave them about 560 euros a month with no questions asked, and compared them to people who are receiving unemployment benefits. The big argument that that people have used against this is it's going to reduce the incentive to work if you just get this money. Turns out the finding after 2 years, there's been zero impact on employment. So the thinking that suddenly people are going to, accept a new job without fear of losing unemployment or encourage risk-taking or possibly entrepreneurship, that hasn't really come to fruition yet, but you haven't seen any of the downsides. And actually the upsides here are huge on the social side. People are less stressed, they're healthier, more confident in the future. And if any of your listeners are interested in a great new book on this, go to Amazon and get The Inner Level by Richard Wilkinson, Kate Pickett. They're looking at how equal societies reduce stress. I think it all ties into this. Great early results from Finland on the UBI.
Yeah. In fact, we had Kate Pickett on the program a couple of weeks ago. Their previous,
I knew you'd be interested.
Yeah, their previous book, The Spirit Level, is brilliant. And the book before that, Why Inequality Matters. They have done some just amazing work. Luke Vargas, Chief Foreign Correspondent for Talk Media News. Search Luke Vargas for his podcast. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
You know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out, patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out, patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America. Our book today for the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Age of Eisenhower, America and the World in the 1950s by William I. Hitchcock. This is from chapter 19, page 475, about 3/4 of the way through the book. Republicans of the 1950s knew how to sell a product. They pioneered the use of television advertising in politics, and at their national conventions in 1952 and 1956, they mobilized actors, dancers, acrobats, sports figures, crooners, jugglers, and sword swallowers to infuse their rather dull message of peace and prosperity with some pizzazz. In mid-July 1960, though, as the GOP faithful gathered in Chicago at the International Amphitheater, the same hall in which Ike and Dick had formed their political tandem 8 years earlier, the convention planners were running out of ideas. A giant elephant named Koa, on loan from Louisiana, proved to be too big to amble down the aisles of the hall and had to be returned. The torchlight parade of 500 young Republicans had to be canceled due to the fire hazard of their kerosene-soaked rags. Plans to get Henry Fonda into costume as Abraham Lincoln, a role he had played woodenly in the 1939 film Young Mr. Lincoln, were scotched when Fonda turned out to be a Democrat. Half the hotel rooms in Chicago remained empty a few days before the convention. Besides an absence of hoopla, the top Republican leaders had serious worries. A Gallup poll on the eve of the convention showed that since 1952, the Republicans had lost support among business and professional voters, white-collar workers, and farmers, three key demographic groups. And they had made no inroads among skilled and unskilled laborers who favored the Democratic Party by a ratio of 4-to-1. President Eisenhower's personal popularity had masked serious weaknesses in the Republican Party. As the Republicans gathered in Chicago, John Kennedy, a junior senator with little international name recognition, led Nixon in the polls by 4 points. And I should add, Nixon was the vice president to Eisenhower. The press corps, bored to tears by the lack of drama in Republican ranks, worked hard to breathe life into the candidacies of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller and Arizona Senator Barry Goldwater, who might, they earnestly hoped, challenge Nixon for the GOP nomination from the left and the right. The Washington Post editorial page noted that both parties inclined toward moderate nominees like Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson, and Nixon, but cautioned that, quote, an excess of moderation can yield a pudding devoid of flavor or shape, end quote, and hoped that Goldwater would add a dash of, quote, pepper to the otherwise bland old party's Chicago solemnities, end quote. Indeed, old guard supporters of the dear departed Bob Taft now had a new champion in the ruggedly handsome conservative from the Desert West. It was not to be. Goldwater did not seek the nomination and backed Nixon. Rockefeller, whom most veteran Republicans distrusted for his ideological elasticity and his vanity, pressured Nixon to adopt a number of Kennedy-like platform planks on issues such as defense spending, civil rights, health insurance, and housing. Nixon, terrified that a Rockefeller boomlet might snatch away his long-sought prize, caved into these demands before meeting with Rocky in New York on July 22nd, 3 days before the convention opened. Rockefeller, in turn, threw his support to Nixon in a feeble gesture of party unity. In extracting concessions from Nixon on the GOP platform, though, Rockefeller managed to weaken Nixon's case that he and he alone had the toughness to confront Khrushchev on the world stage. The real challenge Nixon faced in taking the leadership of the Republican Party did not come from Goldwater or Rockefeller. It came from Eisenhower, Of course, Ike supported Nixon's presidential bid since Nixon offered the best hope of extending the Eisenhower legacy. But the distance between those two men, which had always been great, never seemed wider than in 1960. Eisenhower had become the world's most respected, most recognized, and most liked man. For all of his apparent political weaknesses and occasional lapses in his mishandling of the U-2 affair, he occupied an unassailable place in the pantheon of great figures of his time. His war service alone would have placed him on history's pedestal, but he followed that with 8 years of dignified leadership of a country whose global power had reached unprecedented dimensions. When Eisenhower arrived in Chicago on July 26 to address the Republican convention, over 1 million Chicagoans lined the streets along his route to the Sheraton Blackstone Hotel. Shouts of joy rang through the miles of well-wishers. "We like Ike" signs dotted the scene, along with hand-painted expressions of thanks to the old warrior. Confetti, so dense that it stuck to Ike's moist and beaming face, poured from the rooftops. Banners and flags draped every storefront, and lampposts in a blaze of red, white, and blue. Seated before him, or behind him in the open-top presidential Lincoln, Illinois Governor William G. Stratton and Senator Everett Dirksen seemed like supernumeraries. It was Ike the crowd wanted. A loudspeaker in a truck following the motorcade blared out a popular tune by the Four Knights. "I love the sunshine of your smile." The president, visibly moved, told reporters outside the hotel, "It's one of the finest crowds I've ever seen." On Tuesday evening, Senator Dirksen, a famously orotund speaker in a profession known for producing magnificent windbags, came to the podium in the amphitheater to introduce the president. Few recalled that 8 years earlier, Dirksen had nominated Senator Taft. Anyhow, the book is The Age of Eisenhower by Hitchcock.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Wow, this is from welcome back, by the way, to the third hour of our program. Reuters is reporting the United States is holding direct communications with members of Venezuela's military, urging them to abandon the elected leader, Nicolas Maduro, and preparing new activity relative to that. This is pretty amazing. Anyway, it's Anything Goes Friday here on the Thom Hartmann Program, and Michael in Los Angeles. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Happy Friday. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of gloss back over the idea of socialism and including that with Medicare for all. I know I'm a smoker myself, and I know a lot of people who smoke or who make what people would consider unhealthy decisions when it comes to their health. And normally, when people do things like that, health insurance companies charge them higher premiums, or their insurance costs are higher. Do you think that in a Medicare for all system, where we're paying through the system through our taxes in some sort of pool kind of system, do you think how do you think that should work for people who don't make smart health decisions? Or I shouldn't say smart health decisions, because I don't want to say like if you smoke you're not smart, but or somebody who chooses not to take better care of themselves versus the other person, and that's
no. I get what you're saying, Michael, and I would say I agree. Smokers are not necessarily dumb; they're drug addicts, and
right.
it needs to be dealt with as such. What you see in countries that have national health care systems is that, for example, when Denmark decided that they were going to encourage people to ride bicycles, so much so that the capital city of Denmark now, more than 50% of the people who commute to work do so on a bicycle. They took entire streets and turned them into bicycle lanes, and major changes. I mean, it's really safe to ride in a bicycle in Denmark. They took that public money and said, okay, we're going to spend X millions of dollars doing this, but you're going to save X millions of dollars in your taxes because people are going to be healthier and they're going to use our medical services less, which you're all paying for with your taxes. And people were like, cool, let's do that. In the Scandinavian countries, where smoking was very, very widespread up until about 2 decades ago, again, national healthcare system, they came out and they said, okay, the portion of your taxes that are being paid every year is this, that goes to cover smoking-related illnesses, and not to mention lost productivity, in the workplace, and lost family members in our families. And so, we're going to radically raise taxes on cigarettes. We're going to require the cigarette companies to put pictures of, blackened lungs on their packages and things like that.
Right.
And the people were like, cool, cut my taxes. So, without going all draconian or calling people stupid or even trying to regulate behavior like we've been doing here in the United States, you can't smoke in the building, all that kind of stuff. The countries that have a national health care system just pull together a national consensus. Hey, let's, again, the thing in Denmark, part of that was an anti-obesity campaign as well, because obesity is costing countries a lot of money.
Yeah, that's another thing. People who make decisions about their health in terms of obesity or in terms of things.
Yeah,
like
again,
that.
I would say that we're using the wrong frame here, Michael. I don't think that most obese people made a decision to become obese. You've got a whole bunch of variables, from genetic variables to apparently the kind of gut bacteria that they have, to a lot of poor people who are obese because they're malnourished. They're buying crap food because they're living off the dollar store, or or they live in a food desert and there's not a real supermarket around, so they just can't get fresh fruit and vegetables, and so they're eating nothing but packaged foods, and boom, that's a prescription for obesity. So I think rather than talking about this, that whole choice thing is the right-wing frame for pretty much everything. But I would say that, tobacco is 5 times more addictive than heroin. It's 10 times more addictive than alcohol. It's a major addictive drug. It needs to be dealt with and treated as a substance, as a medical problem. Obesity needs to be dealt with as a medical problem. Rather than a moral problem, or rather than a choice. And there's other things as well. Lack of exercise, another one. We don't exercise in the United States. It just doesn't. People, you walk around neighborhoods that have sidewalks, and you never see anybody walking on the sidewalk. You walk around, neighborhoods, even suburban neighborhoods in Germany. People go out for walks as part of their recreation. Well, they're also encouraged to, and they're encouraged through school, through kind of essentially social engineering, because it saves the health system of the country money. So that's how it works, and it's, I think, one of the most important reasons to go with a Medicare for All system is because it actually makes everybody healthier at the end of the day, and it encourages all of us to use your phrase, to make better choices. I would say to seek treatment, right? to have a healthcare system that says, you want to deal with your obesity, you want to deal with your smoking, you want to deal with your, whatever, your lack of exercise, whatever it may be. Come on in. It won't cost you anything. Come talk to the doctor. We'll work this out. So, Michael, great points all. Thank you very much, and I hope you can figure out a way to quit smoking, or at least start, chewing gum instead, which is nowhere near as destructive to you as the stuff that you're inhaling. David in Oceanside, California. Hey, David. Thanks for listening to KPFK. What's up?
Hi. How are you?
I'm great. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Thanks for talking to me. I want to talk to you about for-profit education. Before that, I say that one short thing. AOC is going to be 35 in 2024.
And I think she'll be president in 2025. Or I hope so.
That'd be a good thing.
There you go.
I once worked in the for-profit vocational education industry. Place I like to call that technical institute that shall not be named.
Okay.
And I will tell you what the profit motive does is it essentially incentivizes these large companies to provide McEducation. They,
muck education, like as in McDonald's.
As in McEducation. We were told. If I would complain about, maybe some quality issues, we were told point blank. This wasn't hemming and hawing. This was not beating around the bush. They were saying, they would tell us to our faces, this is a business first.
Right.
Before it's a school, it's a business. They had counselors who were actually high-pressure salespeople. They would do many things like, I come to find out they were telling a lot of these students that, the public schools were horrible. And, that was a big part of the sales pitch. They would pitch to these mostly low-income, students from low-income families, very often not a lot of academic preparation. And they would bring them in here mainly because this was a demographic that qualified for the maximum amount of student aid And if they didn't qualify for student aid, they'd get them into these loans. You know, the financial aid department was rather, you know, the counselors, i.e. high-pressure salespeople, and the financial aid people made more than the instructors.
Wow.
And, you know,
in other words, the business side of the business was more profitable than the education side of the business.
Yeah, they didn't care if I taught them anything at all.
Wow.
You know, I did teach them. You know, and I'm actually proud of the job I did.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I wound up being unceremoniously escorted from the building after I and several of the other instructors complained about them altering our attendance records, because we're supposed to keep attendance because the government was, you know, they call this private industry,
right?
But they were getting a lot of their funding from government sources.
Sure.
You know, grants, you know, large default rate on the student loans.
Yep.
And my job was primarily to keep them in that seat. And we would teach them, you know, I was teaching computer-aided design drafting, which is a very technical field. There's geometry, there's standards on ANSI 14.5 and all these, you know, standards that go into technical communications so they can make parts out of these drawings. And the students were bored by that. So the counselors were telling them, well, Disney hires a lot of our people, and you can, you know, draw Woody and Roger or whoever.
So just learn how to draw the mouse. Don't worry about the geometry.
Yeah, and I'm frustrated because these students, I don't want to
That's
learn
amazing.
geometry.
David, we're hitting the break.
Where's the Mickey Mouse icon?
Yeah, you want to summarize your point in a sentence here, please?
I summarize it again. It's McEducation, and this is what the DeVos and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation wants. They want to do away with public education because they're not making enough money off of it.
I agree. David, I don't know about the Gates Foundation, but certainly Betsy DeVos and her friends. David, thank you very much for the call. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Anything Goes Friday. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment, helping you win the water cooler wars every day. And welcome back. Gary in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Hey, Gary, what's on your mind today?
Tom, just a little correction. Yesterday, you read from a list of parts of the government that are agencies, whatever, that are social constructs.
Right,
okay?
Socialist, yes.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned the Postal Service. I'm sorry, but the Postal Service cannot be on that list because it receives zero tax money.
But the infrastructure of the post office, the buildings, the cars, well, I don't know about the cars, but the older infrastructure of the post office, that is government provided, is it not? Don't we build post office buildings?
No. They are all leased, and even the old ones that were built under the WPA have all been
privatized and leased back?
Those are ran by the General Services Administration.
So the post office pays rent on them.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Thank you, Gary.
And it's been 30 years.
Okay. That's great. And those were the postal reforms in quotes. It's been a little more than 30 years, wasn't it? Didn't that happen during Reagan?
1974 was the Reorganization Act, and subsidies were phased out over 10 years. So by 85, they received no tax money.
Right. Cool. Okay, Gary. For the future, I will not call the post office a socialist institution. Thanks for the tip. I appreciate the call. It's good to hear from you. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Hey, Carol, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Back at you.
One of the things I want to say real quickly before I get into why I called is I recommend the book The Age of Ice for everyone to read.
Dar Jamaal's new book, yeah.
Yeah, it's so much worse than we knew. It's a very scary book.
Yeah.
But the reason I called was about the fact that I support Medicare for all, and I am a democratic socialist and have been for many years. But the reason that I think we're missing the boat on the, Medicare for all promotion is we need to promote it more as a job creator. Because I think that really, if we had Medicare for all, that would bring back an awful lot of jobs that have gone to Mexico and Canada. What do you think?
I agree. And it would also encourage people to quit dead-end jobs and start their own businesses.
Yes.
I mean, if we can combine that with something, breaking up the big monopolies or stopping big monopolies from existing, do away with the Bork rules that came into place during the Reagan administration, and instead, make it possible for people to get into small business and build the small, family business. Medicare for all.
And also, I think that Medicare for all would also give us a healthier workplace. It would eliminate a lot of the things which cause obesity. Stress is a great creator of smokers and drinkers and people who overeat. I mean, there are so many things that would be solved if we had Medicare for all.
Agreed on all counts, Carol. And it's good for the public health. It's good for entrepreneurship. It's good for employees. It's good all the way around. And as an employer, I would no longer have to pay for workman's comp. I would no longer have to pay for health insurance. I'm all in favor of it. Carol, thank you for the call. We'll be right back. So would you like to watch the Thom Hartmann program? All 3 hours of our program, anytime you'd like? It's available. Would you like to hear special content where we talk about, what the billionaires are up to, or climate change, or the newest things in science? There's all kinds of great content like that. That's also available. The place to find all this is the Thom Hartmann channel over on Patreon. Patreon.com, Patreon.com /Thom Hartmann, THOMHARTMANN, all run together. Patreon.com /Thom Hartmann. And there, when you become a supporter of the program through Patreon, you have access to the full 3-hour show every day, anytime you want, any place you want, and special content that we put up every single week that is unique specifically to our Patreon page. So check it out.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
77. Anything Goes Friday. Brian in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Brian, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for taking my call. Something I've been wanting to say on your show for quite a while in regards to the often heard sentiment about like how Democrats are not liberal enough or progressive enough or left enough or whatever. And it pains me that the following is the case, but I think we're at a point in our country where you have to not start with the premise of what will the Democratic Party do for me, but you really have to start with the baseline of what will the Republican Party do to me, and actually, unfortunately, lower our expectations. So if you're only getting 50% of what you want from Democrats and you're not happy with the 50%, what are you going to do? Like throw away your vote and your support of them so that you're at the point where your Republicans are doing zero for you, if only zero. I mean, it might be much worse than that. You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
I hate that we have to lower our expectations to that, but I get real frustrated with people who are like, well, so-and-so is not liberal enough and they're not doing exactly what they're doing, And from hearing you talk, I think you agree, but haven't put it like in those words. But it's very depressing to say, ask not what your Democratic Party will do for you, but what the Republican Party will do to you. But that's the reality.
I think you've got a bumper sticker there, Brian. It's a great slogan. Thank you very much. Charles in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Hey, Charles, what's on your mind today?
Yes, hi, Tom. Having watched you for a number of years, I really do appreciate the excellent information that you give out.
Thank you.
But I I assume that you'll agree with me that this information doesn't penetrate the heads of hardcore Trump supporters.
I think that's largely because, and I'm basing this on all the hardcore Trump supporters who have called into this program over the years, or people who called themselves conservatives and said, I listened to your show for a month or so, and I changed my opinion. I think it's because they live in a media bubble.
Yeah, well, that's true, but I think that I can propose a strategy that might penetrate the brain freeze a little bit to enforce accountability. With these
What's
folks.
that?
I think they have a particular psychological perspective that has to be penetrated. I assume you're familiar with the psychotherapeutic technique of mirroring.
Yes.
Behavior. Yeah, and reflecting theirs and Trump's irrational positions back to them. I recently came across an excellent vehicle to maybe, if this can be disseminated, to have these folks kind of key into this, into the.
So can you boil this down, Charles? What are you specifically suggesting?
Yeah, have you heard of the YouTube video Trackdown, which is
no, and I'm not going to go watch a YouTube video. What are you specifically suggesting, Charles?
Well, have them look at a whole scenario which goes through what.
Nobody's going to do that, Charles. It has to be something that is tight and that is clean and clear. That you can, say or do. I mean, you're not going to walk up to some Trump supporter and say, hey, go watch this YouTube video.
No,
you have to make the message your own and say it in a sentence.
Well, this should.
And I'm not hearing that.
Well, this should be a 30 to 60 second media blitz in terms of different spots.
And what's the essence of this?
The essence is that there's a con man named Trump who comes to town and tells people only he can save them from an upcoming catastrophe and help them build a wall around their homes. And this hits you between the heads. This is being said on a 60-year-old. I won't get into.
You're talking about the movie about the guy named Trump who came to this town and said all that. Yeah, and that's out there, but I don't think that's going to convince any Trumpsters. But it is pretty amazing. Charles, thank you for pointing that out. Dion in Millsboro, Delaware. Hey, Dion, what's up?
Hi, Tom. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for watching us on Facebook Live. What's up? Oh, we only have a half a minute here. I'm sorry. I should have put.
I wanted to get back to the guy who was talking about smoking. I've been trying to quit smoking for 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to say that I agree with you 100%. It is an addiction. You have to use psychological methods in order to break that habit because you're so used to going for that cigarette you're upset. Something pissed you off. No, excuse me. Something upset
okay.
you.
No, I agree. I smoked for 5 years. I know exactly what you're talking about, Dion. And it was Louise getting pregnant with our oldest child and telling me, and she was smoking at the time too, and saying, I'm quitting, and if you don't quit, you're not sleeping in our bed. I quit smoking. I mean, there are limits. Dion, thanks a lot for the call, and I wish you the very best in trying to quit. It's a huge challenge. Like I said, this is 5 times more addictive than heroin.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Which is why it's so important that we make tobacco absolute, and particularly the new vapes, absolutely unavailable to young people. In the Thom Hartmann Book Club today, our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality, and it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, that they make their call to action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a nonpartisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture, whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, These men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering beyond the present wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with our crazy alert for the day. Da-da-da! This is just like totally weird, right? Our crazy alert. Heavily armed people. This is the City of New York Police Department sent a letter to Google. You know, Waze is this traffic app that Google recently bought, and it's crowdsourced. Everybody who's using Waze, you know, if you see an accident, if you see the police, you see whatever, you push a button on your screen and it pops up on everybody else's. And so people have been warning each other about DWI stops in New York City. And the cops are seriously upset about this. We demand that Google LLC, upon receipt of this letter, immediately remove this function from the Waze application. Further, the NYPD requests that Google take every necessary precaution to ensure that GPS data of NYPD DWI checkpoints is not uploaded or posted at any future time on the Waze mobile application, etc. Google responds saying, "We believe that informing drivers about upcoming speed traps allows them to be more careful and make safer decisions when they're on the road." Yeah, I'd say if the New York Police Department thinks that Waze is going to do away with that, they are the crazy ones. Joy in Hotchkiss, Colorado. Hey, Joy, thanks for watching YouTube. What's up?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Well, first, run, Bernie, run. we're desperate, and so I will. I'll support Bernie to the ends of the earth. I also wanted to say thank you so very much for reading the book from Ocean Robbins. Ocean is wonderful, and his father, John Robbins, and people should read all of those books, Diet for a New America, Food Revolution. And I just met up with Will Tuttle, and he's doing fabulous work, too. And I don't know, have you ever had him on your show?
I don't know who he is.
Okay, well, I would say look him up. He wrote a book called The World Peace Diet, and he and his wife Madeline go around. They're in an RV, and they just go all over the place talking about how we get to what the state of the world is with, and it's not about blame. He's very good. He's really good, and he talks about just the society, the animal domination, the domination of the feminine.
Yeah.
All of the different things, what all is happening, how atrocious it all is, and people don't realize it. We're almost out of Earth. We have maybe 10 more years before we. I mean, you talk about it all the time, but that we are collapsing. Yep. We are really collapsing. You don't even see squirrels or rabbits. I don't anymore. We are collapsing. The oceans are collapsing, and people say, "Yeah, I know, but gee, they shouldn't do that." But gee, it sure does taste good. Yeah. We need to wake up. I've been a vegan for over 30 years, and I strongly advocate it. And
here's the good news, Joy. We now have a vegan running for president of the United States, Cory Booker.
Yay!
Yeah. I mean, that just tells me that this has gone mainstream, and you're absolutely right. If you want to live light on the world,
all those years ago too.
Yeah.
I was a strong advocate for him.
Yeah, but he was never a serious candidate. Cory Booker actually could become president of the United States. Dennis Kucinich never. He was a great guy. I had him on my show a lot. He said a lot of wonderful things, but he basically used that stage to promote his policy views, which was wonderful. Congratulations, good on him for doing that. But nobody ever thought he'd actually become president. Cory Booker could actually become president, and he's a vegan. And bottom line, Joy, spot on. Thank you very much for the call and for saying it. If you want to walk lighter on the earth, if you want to live lighter, if you want to reduce your carbon footprint, the single most effective thing you can do is eat an enormously large, eat a lot less meat. I mean, it's just meat and poultry. It's just, that's the bottom line. Ryan in Sebastopol, California. Hey, Ryan, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for all you do. Long-time listener. I was just hoping to get your thoughts on something that's been on my mind. The Khashoggi murder and all the headlines that it got, rightfully so. I was wondering why we seemingly don't put any pressure on Mexico to deal with all the corruption that they have. I mean, they have journalists and activists and politicians being murdered all the time. I'm just wondering why
Mostly by
we
drug
don't
lords.
ever,
Because
sanctions or...
Yeah, it's because that's for Mexico to deal with. I mean, you know, it's not America's job to run around the world fixing every country. And frankly, now that Mexico, and Ryan, thanks for the call, now that Mexico has AMLO, you know, I mean, they've got basically Bernie Sanders as president down there in Mexico right now, and he seems to be doing a really good job. So one of my very best friends from, you know, literally from high school and college days, lives part-time in Mexico. And the stories that I'm hearing about life in Mexico are really pretty surprising in a positive way. Norma in Montgomery, Alabama. Hey, Norma, what's up?
Hi, Dr. Tom. Thanks for taking me. First, let me say that your earlier caller, Brian, said it's not what the Democratic Party can do for you, but what the Republican Party will do to you. Yeah, that's a great thing. You know,
Yep.
I really appreciated his call. But everybody is talking about who is going to run for president, who are we going to support. Well, most people need to stop and think about the fact that the 2020 election also means that everybody in the House is up for re-election again. We need to fight to keep the Democratic majority. But also you have Class 2 in the Senate, and that includes people like Susan Collins, Judy Ernst, and Tom Cotton, you know, a senator from Louisiana. All of these people are up in Class 2 are up for re-election.
Mm-hmm.
Here in Alabama, in exactly 11 months, we have the opportunity of getting people on the ballot for about 2 weeks. What are the rules in other states? All of these people are talking about how we want so-and-so to run. Well, do you even know how to get your candidate on the ballot? Do you know what your state requires? What is the fee? How many petitions do you need with how many signatures?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a
all
city
excellent
election.
points. Norma, aren't these great reasons for people to show up at their local Democratic Party and say, I'd like to participate, educate me?
Well, let me tell you what happened at ours. They had an election, and Doug Jones was supporting a candidate to take over the Democratic Party. They had 140 paid-up members of the State Executive Democratic Committee sign in, and they had 190 votes. And we have an we have an investigation next week as to why Nancy Worley won by 11 votes. That is what's going on with our party, and if we don't get people to stand up and pay attention and start screaming, we will not have anybody elected again. We lost every election last year.
Wow.
Every.
Wow, and you're saying that you've got some problems inside the Democratic Party there in Montgomery, Alabama.
Yes, and when the Democratic Party demands that a candidate pay them $25,000 up front to get any support, there is corruption.
Yeah, that by itself, that's almost the definition of it. Norma, thanks for the heads up on that. That's amazing. Jeff in Mount Hope, Wisconsin. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good day, Tom. Hey, I wanted to bring up a fact or an idea that I have when I pick somebody that I'm going to vote for because I feel I'm a progressive, independent person. And what I do is I will go find who their top 5 donors are. So if they're getting money from big oil, big pharma, and so on, go on down the list, they're not anybody that I'm going to vote for. But if you go down through and you find like a Bernie Sanders type candidate, and you see he's getting money from the people, that's my guy.
Yeah. I think at a certain level, at least over this next year and a half or so as we go into the 2020 election, we have to temper that somewhat. If a person, Bernie ran for the Senate in Vermont. There's only 600,000 people who live in Vermont. So you've got, maybe 200,000 voters or 300,000. And so, he can do retail politics. He doesn't have to, get funding from wealthy people. He doesn't have to get funding from industry. I lived in Vermont, Louisiana. I lived there for 10 years, and 3 different times, without intending to, I ended up in the middle of a Bernie rally because we were just walking around downtown, and Bernie was holding a town hall right out in the middle of the public park. Or another time it was, in Montpelier at the farmers market, and give Bernie $20 and you get a hot dog and a Coke or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but that kind of thing. If you are a senator, a Senate candidate, however, from New York or California, or New Jersey in the case of Cory Booker, California in the case of Kamala Harris, it's a hell of a lot harder you literally cannot do retail politics. And so you have to have surrogates do that, which is expensive and time consuming, or you have to use the media, and that means you have to have dollars. And so I think that while I completely agree with you, Jeff, that I would love to see all of our candidates entirely funded by small donations, I think that's only something that can be done. Although, the rebuttal to what I just said is Beto O'Rourke, that he raised all that money without taking corporate money down in Texas and nearly beat Ted Cruz, but, not quite. But anyhow, I think that, we should maybe cut a little slack to some of these candidates who in the past have taken corporate money. What do you think?
If you look at his voting record, you'll see Beto O'Rourke's. You'll see that he voted more in line with the Republican side of things than he did with the progressive side of things, and that's what I'm trying to point out. If we're going to, the majority of the people that won these Senate seats, congressional seats in this last primary, you'll find that they were all ran on progressive platforms. That's what's going to take everything in the future. If you run on a progressive platform and you don't take the money from big corporations, you're going to come out on top, I think.
I absolutely agree. But I'm thinking specifically that Cory Booker's taking money from Big Pharma. He's walked that back now. He said he's not going to do it anymore. But, do we hold that against him? I don't think so. But, I understand the point. Jeff, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. It's 45 minutes past the hour. Yeah, 15 minutes before the hour. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It looks like Whitaker, the acting AG, in his testimony just said that they didn't bother keeping track of the parents after they stole their children. That's mind-boggling. And welcome back. Tony in Los Lunas, New Mexico. Hey, Tony, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech TV.
Hey, Tom. Just calling in, kind of following back to Wednesday's subject, which was the State of the Union. And first of all, just a little personal opinion is that I think the State of the Union is pretty uncivil right now.
Yes, it seems.
Primarily what I was calling about is the polls.
Okay.
And that they should be fairly concerning to the Democratic Party, and not the 97% that approval that was by the Republicans, but 30% of Democrats and 82% of independents approved of the State of the Union.
You mean approved of the speech or approve of the actual state of our union?
Approved of the speech, approved of Trump's speech, yes.
Yeah.
And, if you're looking at, almost a third of the Democrats that watched it and 82% of the independents, I think that the Democratic Party may very well be hitting on the wrong message with this socialism thing. It's
I'm not sure that that's the case. I think that what we're seeing here is that Abe Lincoln was absolutely right, that, while you can't fool all of the people all of the time, you can fool some of the people all of the time. And you can fool all of the people some of the time. And that's what Donald Trump was doing in his State of the Union address. He told a lie on average every 2 minutes. And what the statistics you're quoting, Tony, say to me is that the media did a really crappy job of pointing out that he was lying literally every 2 minutes throughout the speech.
Well, I think when people say lying, I've done a lot of research into this, and
lying is when you say something that's not true.
To be lying is a difference of opinion.
No, I'm not talking about differences of opinion, Tony. Donald Trump told lies. He told numerous lies in his State of the Union address. He said, after 24 months of progress, our economy is the envy of the world. And it wasn't after 24 months. It was after 9 years, number one. And number two, we're not the envy of the world. Number two, he said that our growth, I quote, he said, the United States economy is the hottest economy anywhere in the world. That's a complete lie. Poland is growing faster than we are. Latvia is growing faster than we are. China and India. Greece is growing faster than we are. He said that, under his administration, the country's added 600,000 new manufacturing jobs. That's a lie. He said the economy added 5.3 million jobs. That's a lie. He said that there's an urgent national crisis of illegal crossings at the border. That's a lie. He said that El Paso had the highest crime rate in the country, or one of the highest crime rates in the country. That's a complete lie. He said that, I mean, it just goes on and on. He said he wants to increase the number of people coming into this country legally while he's dialing back. You know, we're down to 20,000 people last year coming in legally, where historically it was $100,000 a year. He lied through his teeth, Tony.
And get to you with what these poll numbers were, and say, you know, I think that maybe this push for socialism could be the wrong thing, because what are you going to do about a large, and I mean an extremely large portion of the country that's totally against socialism?
You educate them.
You know, well, what are you going to do? Education camps like the Weather Underground?
No, Tony, 5 years ago, you had progressives refusing to call themselves liberals because Rush Limbaugh had demonized the word liberal for 25 years. You know, now Americans are saying, yeah, I'm a liberal. I mean, you know, words go in and out of fashion.
Progressive was another word for communist.
Yeah. See, that's the thing. I mean, I think that we simply need to reclaim the word. Tony, thanks for the call. You know, Donald Trump says he wants a wall. He wants $5 billion to pay for a wall, which will probably cost around $80 billion when all is said and done. But he wants his almost $6 billion right now. We could actually save $6 billion in the United States if we simply ended homelessness. It's very simple, very straightforward. It has been done in other countries. It actually saves money. We would literally reduce our expenditures by $6 billion a year by ending homelessness. I've got a whole rant about exactly how this works, how Finland did it, how Cuba has done it, how we can do it, and how we would save money doing it over on patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. You can check it out. Patreon.com/THOMHARTMANN, all run together. It's really a pretty extraordinary thing. So please check that out. Patreon.com/Thom Hartmann for a really good rant on how we can end homelessness in America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Homelessness in America. Patrick in Seaside, California. Hey, Patrick, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to say that I'm kind of reluctantly involved in multi-level marketing because of the product I'm taking, just so I can take the product that I'm using right now, which is a 3-part detox program, I guess invented by Dr. Chris Shade, that claims to remove high 90 percentile of not just normal day toxins and what have you, but heavy metals and pesticides and herbicides. But I wanted just more reinforcement from you, just so I feel like I'm not crazy. 10 years ago, some friends were involved in ACM, the whole Trump scam, which was basically a glorified built-in telephone answering machine with Skype, and they wanted me to get involved, and I said, oh, hell no, especially because it was Trump. I think that multi-level marketing is like one of the many millions of ramifications of what's evil about capitalism. But like I said, I got involved because my friend, who's my former doctor, signed me up, and I'm taking the product, and I think it's the real deal. Is it possible that I wanted to hear more of your thoughts on multi-level marketing, and is it possible for people who are involved in this company, which I won't name, for us to take it over and go, you know what, make it available to the public? Because I have 5 close friends who could benefit from this product, but they can't afford it because their prices are outrageously expensive. And the reason I'm like, I don't even recruit anybody, but I get the lowest price by being a quote-unquote affiliate. I think it's evil. I just wanted your thoughts on multi-level marketing.
That's my sense of it too, Patrick. When Louise and I were in Orlando about 6 months ago for Richard Bandler's NLP week-long NLP workshop, and in fact we did our show from there, as you'll recall. There was a guy there, along with his wife, who had signed up for the course, and he was like, "Oh, we need to talk. I want to buy you lunch." And he was just showering all his attention on Louise and I this one morning, and we were like, "Okay, cool, we'll go to lunch with you." And we went to lunch, and we thought we were going to talk about NLP or something like that, and instead, what we got over the entire meal was this sales pitch for what I'm guessing is the exact same product, about this guy who developed this thing and it saved his life or his wife's life or something like that, and it's got all these things that you can't get anywhere else, and it's gonna detox you and it's gonna save your life. And I've been using it for months and I feel great, and it was just absurdly expensive. And my response was, tell me what the ingredients are. Let me see the ingredients. If these things are legal, I can buy them elsewhere at a much lower price. I may have to buy 2 or 3 bottles of something to get them all together in the same formula, but there's no such thing as a totally proprietary product anymore. And
the thing has 3. I won't tell the initials, but it's basically 123initials.com.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure we're talking about the same thing. I was only half paying attention because I was so offended that this guy, instead of seeing me as a colleague, instead of seeing me even as a potential friend, saw me as a guy who could deliver money to him. And that's what so offends me about multi-level marketing, is that, I've had family members do this back when we lived in Michigan back in the 60s and 70s. I had a family member who became an Amway distributor for a couple of months and, nearly destroyed all of his relationships with our family. I mean, it's predatory. And so, I've got a real problem with multi-level marketing, broadly speaking. And it's insanely profitable, as you point out, these absurdly high prices, because there's all these people, everybody's taking a bite of it all the way up and down. And then at the very top, you've got, the DeVos family is worth billions, maybe tens of billions of dollars. And every penny of that came from their skimming some money off the top of somebody hustling their neighbor, their cousin, their nephew, their kid, their patient, their fill in the blanks. I just think it's wrong. I think it should be banned.
It seems to me that it's only the people at the very top that make any money, and those
That's
of us
correct.
like myself and my friends who are grunts usually.
At the bottom, you're working your ass off, and in many cases, I know from back in the Amway days that my relative was probably making 50 cents an hour. When you consider all the time and effort that goes into figuring out who can you make the sales pitch to and all this stuff. I would say if a product, if they're selling a product and they're not listing the ingredients, and those and you can go online and DuckDuckGo the ingredients and find out what they are and where they are and how to buy them. If that product is any good, somebody is going to compete with it, and you will be able to find that competition. And if there's nobody competing with it, odds are the claims that are being made are complete BS. So that's my and I was pretty sure after listening to this guy's sales pitch that the product that he was hustling at me was complete BS. But that's just a whole separate thing. Patrick, I need to move along, but thank you for the call. I'm very wary of these things. James in Spokane. Hey James, what's up?
How you doing? My favorite wordsmith. How you doing today, Tom?
Great, but we just have 15 seconds, James. I'm sorry, I missed the clock.
I better call back.
Okay, you don't have a quick point you want to make. All righty.
Well,
you want to try it?
About the billionaires, we are to them perennial working class. You familiar with the term blackguard?
Slackers, yeah.
Yeah, that's the lowest classification of household staff. They're responsible for the pots and pans.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, the chamber pots and the bed pans. That's what we are to them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, James. You're absolutely right. Thank you very much for the call. Thanks for working with me in my 15 seconds there. Thanks to you for being with us today. Listening, watching, whatever it may be, thanks so much. And don't forget, as we go into this weekend, have a wonderful and safe weekend. And don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It's something we all have to work on. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.